The protagonist begins by saying it was a boring life. He was born into a regular family and lived regular days. Most days were dull, and he believed he would die without anything special ever happening. However, that wasn't the case. One of the protagonist's eyes glows as he says everything changed. On the screen is a blonde character, and he says he found a game called Heroes of Destiny, and that's how he became the owner of the world. However, now back in his apartment, he's really happy because he's finally alone. It's not that he likes or dislikes school. He turns on his PC and says it's just that when he's playing that alone is enough to make him happy. In this place, he's the protagonist. He always preferred single-player games because you can play countless routes countless times. You can even use some hacks and surpass all the system's limits. It was like the entire world there existed solely for one player. However, with a sheepish expression, he says that's what he thought, but now it's time to start over. He turns on the live stream and someone asks if he's really streaming in the middle of the week. The whole chat starts mocking the guy, asking if he's some kind of bum who doesn't go to school and just stays on the PC, until someone named AGJ sends a donation of 10. Even though it wasn't much, he was happy since something is better than nothing. Then someone named DEA sends 1,000. Now he's confused. He grabs the monitor and everyone in the chat wants to know who this crazy person is. They're saying they're sure this guy will ask for a refund, but the person just asks him to check his email. When he opens the inbox, it's a message from the game's creator. He says he's a viewer who always watches the channel and is also a developer. He made a game some time ago that was so hard that nobody managed to finish it during the closed beta, and he wanted our guy to play this game to check its difficulty and approve whether he liked it or not. The protagonist got intrigued by this claim that no one could finish it, and what if he managed to complete it? Even a regular guy like him could become someone special. A window on the PC asks if he wants to install the game, and he immediately says yes. With that, a game called Heroes of Destiny begins. The message says the kingdom of Roke was destroyed by the kingdom of Japal in 294. He would be born as an insignificant soul in this place and become a hero to stop the resurrection of the demon king. And when he ascended to the god's throne, he'd be granted any wish he desired. Over an ocean, he says the graphics are much worse than he imagined. But considering it's a game developed by a single person, this is the limit of what can be done. He then writes his name, which would be master of the game. And with that, a welcome message to the continent of Ellen appears. He then finds himself lost in the middle of a forest. The game seemed pretty ordinary and weird because it didn't even have a tutorial, but he was fine with that. That's when he noticed something ahead. It was the village chief who says he's not a familiar face and asks what he wants there. However, the protagonist found it strange because there was no dialogue box. Seeing there was a box to type in, he wondered if the NPC could really understand what he was saying. He then tells the old man to hand over all the money or he'll kill everyone in the village. He waits anxiously to see how the man will respond, only for the old man to whack him on the head, asking what nonsense the boy is spouting. With that, his character falls to the ground and obviously, he dies. He was confused, trying to figure out if he could really talk to the characters. The game asks if he wants to try again, and he says of course he won't give up like that. This time, the old man asks the same question. But now he says he's in need of food and drink and asks for help. The old man, feeling sorry for him, leads him to the village and tells him to follow. He then enters the man's house, who gives him a mug, telling him to drink it to calm down first. The protagonist thanks him and drinks it, only to be poisoned and die in the chair. He then gets an idea and unplugs the internet cable from his PC. Without the internet, there'd be no way for the game's creator to control these NPCs. However, when he goes to talk to the old man, everything is bugged and strange. And in the next second, a message appears saying he was killed for speaking nonsense. At that moment, he realizes that disconnecting the internet isn't the secret to winning this. He then remembers that the name of the person who developed this game was DEA, but he has no idea if this is really a person or the name of the team behind it. It was already 1:30 a.m. and he decided to save since that was enough for one day. However, he was impressed that there was a game where you could talk to NPCs. It was almost like this world of heroes really existed. Now it made sense why no one managed to beat it during the beta test. He opens his eyes before going to sleep, thinking that he was really getting excited. From that day on, driven by the desire to be special, he was absorbed into that game. As he progressed, he lost track of time. He was completely immersed, and this continued for 10 years. Wow, the guy is motivated, huh? 10 years playing the same thing. In an office, someone calls for Oshiro-san. Turns out it's his coworker. She says she's already sent the files he asked for, and the guy thanks her. Some time passes, and she congratulates him for finishing everything. Our boy thanks her as well and helps while she stands there, a bit embarrassed, not knowing what to say. She then asks him why they don't go out for a little dinner, just the two of them, before heading home, and maybe have a second dinner after they get home. Her face clearly shows what she's hoping for. However, our Oshiro-san apologizes, saying he has to go home. The poor girl is left stunned. He says there's something much more important he has to do and waves goodbye. It seems she's disappointed again, having been rejected once more. She's been getting turned down for quite some time. I'll let it slide this time because today is the day he's finally finishing the game after 10 years, right? So, let's see. Apparently, the night turned into morning. He is congratulated for being the first human to enter the ranks of the gods, and for being registered in the Hall of Honor. Our guy is standing there, all happy that he finally managed to finish it. But his smile quickly changes expression. After so long, he managed to do what he always wanted, to become in some way special. But on the other hand, his life was more ordinary than ever. Wouldn't it have been much more extraordinary to be with his coworker? Huh, you idiot. At least in the game, he felt like he had lived something entirely different. He remembers the characters like the Black Prince, Gale Krakow, Cardinal Cesar Libaro, and the witch Celestina Urin. All the characters were full of charm and unique personalities. The reactions there were so lifelike that he felt those people existed somewhere else. But now, rubbing his eyes, he knows it's all over, until he hears a sound. Looking at the screen, he sees a message asking if he wants to start a new adventure. But this is a very honest message, warning him that if he presses yes, he'll be teleported to the continent of Ellen. And after selecting it, he wouldn't return until the game was completed. Oshiro wonders if there's some kind of secret stage. However, with his mouse, which looks more like a brick, he says he's eager to go through it all again. And now that he's come this far, he had no choice but to move forward. Of course, he's transported to the continent of Ellen. At least unlike other protagonists, he was 100% warned. A strange voice welcomes the master of the game. Slowly, he opens his eyes, wondering why his chest hurts so much. He couldn't breathe properly and had no idea what room he was in, until someone next to him says he's finally awake. It's an old man with a mustache who says it's thanks to the high-tier potion he had reserved. The boy starts to open his eyes, and the man calls him Calyx-sama. But our confused protagonist asks who the mustachioed man is, leaving him unsure of what to say. As far as he remembers, the healer didn't mention this potion causing amnesia. However, the protagonist has a desolate look, clearly confused. The man then says he'll introduce himself again and states his name is Russell. The protagonist quickly notices the man isn't speaking Japanese, but he can understand everything he's saying. But the worst part is that he's still feeling the same chest pain since he woke up. Russell apologizes, saying it's his fault for rushing him. The chest pain was a side effect of the potion he gave him, but it would pass soon enough. He then says the boy will feel much better shortly, so he'll take his leave for now. With that, the door closes while our boy is left standing there confused. Some time passes and the candle goes out. He opens his eyes again and rises from the bed. Going to the mirror, it's just as he thought. His body feels entirely different, and it's obvious he's in a different body. A body he has no idea who it belongs to. He can remember the 30 years he lived, but he can't even figure out his name in this moment. Looking at himself in the mirror, he wonders who in this world this person is. That's when the famous system window appears. Player name, Calyx-Shiken. A noble with no profession, completely battered and broken. Level 8 with a reputation of 3 stars and 14% approval. Additionally, he possesses the governing skills of finance, development, and military. What Calyx notices is that this screen looks very similar to the game system's interface. Now the whole being sent to the continent thing really made sense. He was in the main stage of the entire game, the famous continent of Ellen. He puts his hand on his chest and says he needs to calm down first. He then feels something strange. He beats his chest again and collapses on the floor in pain. This body of his was a wreck, and he had no idea why. But at least it was clear this wasn't just a dream. First, he'd have to get used to being called Calyx-Shiken. He goes to the bed and keeps repeating to himself over and over that he is this Calyx guy. As soon as he thinks about the window, it appears again. He's certain this must be the kind of thing only he can see. At this moment, he's 15 years old, and he decides now is the perfect time to gather information. After all, if he lets his guard down in this world, he'll be killed. He checks the system and sees he belongs to the county of Shiken. If the name of the place and his last name are the same, that means he's the direct heir of this land's ruling family. At least he was lucky in that regard. That's when someone knocks on the door, startling him as he wonders who it could be. He doesn't know how to react or what would be the normal way for Calyx to respond. He keeps repeating to himself that he is Calyx while saying nothing. Then we see that it's a girl outside. She brought a big steaming cup of tea, saying it's the boy's medicine. Realizing she's a maid, he decides to act with some dignity and tells her to come in. The girl steps into the room asking for permission. Calyx watches her closely as she walks in, kneels, and offers the medicine. What kind of medicine is this? She just walked in and I don't see any medicine there, huh? Now I see it. She's saying it's nice and warm and that he should give it a try. Our boy, who clearly needs a gym membership because he looks malnourished, asks who she is. But then he realizes that asking this will make it obvious he's not in his right mind. The girl looks confused and asks if he's feeling unwell. That's when a system window pops up in his head and he says no. The system shows that her name is Layla. She's 23 years old, has a reputation of -3, and a very low approval rating. However, he notices something odd in the system. She's affiliated with the Viscount of the Hoshiran territory. Considering they're in the county of Shiken, why is that listed in the system? Moreover, there's something even stranger. She has an unusually high combat capability, way too high for a simple maid. For someone who's played the game, he knows these are definitely not the stats of an ordinary servant. She's standing there staring at him, clearly waiting for him to drink. But looking at the tea, he's already made up his mind. No way he's drinking this thing from someone working for another house. Layla asks if he's alright and insists he drink the tea, but Calyx just tells her to leave it there and go. She starts smiling brightly, insisting he drink it right now. Calyx grabs her hand angrily, suspecting she's about to force him somehow. But as soon as it's in his hand, he fakes a cough and spills it to the side. As the cup falls, he thinks that's enough. Once all the liquid is spilled, he won't have to drink it. But then Layla, in a display of Spider-Man level reflexes, catches the cup mid-air, ensuring not a drop is wasted. Seeing her pull off the classic Peter Parker move, he has no idea what to do. He takes the cup back slowly while wondering what kind of reflexes she has. It would be bad if their eyes met, as she might realize he did it on purpose. As she stands up, he lowers his head and looks away. She places the tea on the desk, saying his medicine is safe. Meanwhile, he's lying in bed, avoiding eye contact with her. He knows there's poison in there, and no way is he drinking it. He closes his eyes, thinking he has to do something about this situation. Just as he's about to pass out, she hugs him. She asks if he's okay, and Calyx wonders that he managed to dodge the situation for now. Looking at the system, he wants to know more about the house Layla belongs to. First, he sees in his status that he's the son of the Count's first wife, who's already passed away. He wonders if there might be some half-siblings from the second wife. He discovers there's one older than him at 16 years old. That's when he sees in the system that the new wife's name also ends with Hoshiran. He immediately connects the dots and realizes this woman must have sent Layla. If Calyx, the son of the first wife, dies, the woman's son will inherit the title of Count. Strangely, the lunatic is breaking out in a cold sweat while feeling excited. As always, the game Heroes of Destiny starts off hard. He then tells Layla he's feeling much better now and thanks her. But he asks how the stepmother is doing. Layla looks surprised and says the Countess is very upset about the boy trying to take his own life. She pleads with him never to do something like that again. That's when Calyx understands why this boy was bedridden and in such bad shape. Judging by the pain in his chest, this guy must have tried to end his own life. He says he won't do such things anymore, and Layla replies that the Countess will surely be happy to hear that. He thanks her again and asks her to leave. But her expression changes and she says he still hasn't taken his medicine. Now he's scared. It seems the damn girl won't leave until he drinks it. The problem is, she's there to kill him, and if he refuses, she might simply assassinate him outright. Even though he knows the game, at this moment he's just a fragile teenager. He could try yelling for help, but what if she cuts him down before anyone arrives? He would definitely die before that happens. She's already turning back to him and he realizes he might not have a choice but to drink it. But then he asks himself the obvious question. Why is she poisoning him instead of just stabbing him and running away? If that's her plan, clearly she can't draw attention to herself. That poison is a way to make it look like he took his own life. It's the same poison that Farmer gave him 10 years ago. And Layla says that if he's having trouble drinking it, she can help. But there's something Calix learned while playing this game. The worst will always happen, so it's best to be prepared. He's certain that even if he refuses, she'll force his mouth open and pour it in. The madman is blushing, saying this makes him really excited. Indeed, the game Heroes of Destiny never disappoints. Layla sits down and offers the tea once more. Suddenly, he grabs the poisoned tea and drinks it all. Layla simply watches as the effects of the poison finally kick in. As he expected, this was bound to happen. Now the question is, how will he get out of this crisis? There must be a person or an object to resolve this situation. That's when he remembers Russell mentioning having some high-tier potions in stock. He comes up with an idea and tells Layla to step outside and call for Russell. She asks why, and he humiliates her, asking if he really has to explain himself to a mere servant. The girl is shocked and quickly apologizes. When he shouts and orders her to leave and fetch Russell, she rushes out. Calix knows that the potion Russell used earlier could be traded for Castle, yet the man didn't hesitate to use it on him. At the very least, he seems like someone who isn't trying to kill him. As soon as Layla leaves the room, he gets up and tries to vomit, but no matter how hard he tries, nothing happens. The game wasn't going to make things that easy. One thing was clear. There was always a solution to every problem. He begins searching through all the drawers, desperately looking for an answer. But the system warns that his eyelids are growing heavy. As his consciousness fades, he continues searching, tossing books and rummaging for a solution, until his eyes grow heavier and he collapses to the floor. He wonders if he'll restart the game from the beginning or truly die for real. That's when he sees something. Right in the middle of the shelves, there's a potion. His expression changes upon spotting it. He starts crawling, finally grabbing the bottle. But upon opening it and taking a sniff, it's not what he expected. It reeks terribly like rotten milk. And that's exactly what it is, spoiled goat milk. He remembers that in the game, yogurt was the antidote for this poison. But can spoiled milk really be considered yogurt? The system once again warns him that his vision is fading. He knows that after the third alert, he'll have only 1 minute left. He brings the drink to his mouth, vowing to get even with Layla, and then he drinks it before losing consciousness again. Sometime later, he wakes up with Russell asking if he's alright. As Calix opens his eyes, he has no idea if it's deja vu or if the game reset. But Russell doesn't understand what he's talking about and points out something more pressing. He wants to know why the room is such a mess and why the boy was sleeping on the floor when he came in. Calix realizes the game didn't reset, he managed to survive. But that near-death experience is something he never wants to go through again. No matter what happens, he is determined to live. Now that this is settled, he needs to check the status of this man. He observes Russell and the system window appears. At the moment, Russell is the acting count of this land because the previous count died and hadn't chosen an heir yet. Even though it's a temporary position, it's something that could help him. The man seems like a strict military type, so Calix believes he can be trusted. At least he was the one who saved him with that potion. Calix calls out to Russell, saying he has something to share. They talk for a while, and it seems Calix tells him everything about what's happening. But Russell says there's no evidence. Calix learns that the potion Russell used was standard protocol in this family. It was just following normal orders. Russell explains that to him, all heirs of the Shikin family are equal, and he is obliged to serve both sides. Calix then asks if Russell wants him to keep taking that medicine until he dies so everyone can claim the inheritance. But Russell questions if Calix really lost his memory. You should know that the Shikin family is in serious financial trouble. In fact, it's a blessing that the Dalila family is helping them. He asks if the boy truly doesn't remember this or is just pretending. Calix realizes Russell won't act without concrete proof. At least he figures the woman who poisoned him must believe he's dead. He tells Russell to let it go, saying it's fine. However, he has a simple request. Russell notices something different in the boy's demeanor. 4 hours later at Shikin Castle, someone moves across the rooftops. The figure stops atop one of the buildings, adjusting their face covering. The person observes the knights below. It appears to be Layla, who notices that security has been significantly increased. She glances at the wall, spots a tunnel, and in the next scene, she's inside the castle. Approaching a door, she sees there are no guards outside the room. She opens it, and inside, she sees a body covered with a sheet. Still, she's not entirely sure if Calix is dead. At least she used a special poison, so he must have died painlessly. She takes a letter from her pocket and places it on the desk. She retrieves a seal from a drawer and stamps the letter. With everything in place, she only needs to leave safely. But suddenly, someone comes up behind her and places a sword to her neck. She instantly recognizes the voice, but the person says nothing, and she can only fear the blade slitting her throat. She pleads with him to wait and screams, claiming it's too late. Lord Calix is already dead, and now the Shikin family can only belong to the Grumbine family. Of course, it's Russell standing behind her, observing everything. She falls silent for a moment. Then she asks if he shouldn't just be a simple noble serving the Shikin family. But that's when the boy stands up and says it all went exactly as he expected. The foolish girl is startled, isn't she? Our guy says that the slow death poison is quite stimulating, but he finds it interesting how one noble family is trying to poison another. He's certain that if this came to light, it would turn into a complete mess. Suddenly, Layla crouches and pulls her arm out of Russell's grip. But as soon as she tries to turn away, he grabs her arm again. With a swift turn and a strike to the ribs, she stumbles, revealing her thighs. Calix knows that the difference between their skill levels is 3 stages. Clearly, she stands no chance. But Layla insists, saying he has no physical evidence, so no one will believe him. However, Calix calmly replies that attempting to assassinate a noble is punishable by death, even if the assailant is a noble themselves. And his evidence is clearly right there on the desk. When it comes to witnesses, he points at her, saying there's one standing right in front of him. Suddenly, her expression changes and the poor girl begins to faint. She collapses to the floor, leaving him unsure of what just happened. Russell explains that she fainted. He places his hand over her body and observes a strange orb of mana. Our boy recognizes it as what's known as a mana hole. Russell explains that she likely doesn't know how to use any mana breathing techniques. She's probably at the level of an elite soldier with good training. Russell, however, notices something odd. Calix doesn't seem impressed by this information, suggesting he already knew about it. He recalls the boy mentioning he had a simple request. Now Russell wants to know how much this kid already knows. Calix says that for now they need to imprison her because they have many favors to ask. Later, the devilish maid is tied to a chair. Her arm looks like it has a pokeball inside it as he tosses a potion at her. Our girl even wipes her face clean. When she wakes up, she finds herself tied to the chair. Calix immediately mentions the slow death poison. Obviously, it kills within 3 to 6 hours. It's the ideal potion for anyone looking to end their own life. He speculates that if he died like that, everyone would think it was by his own choice. He grabs her face and asks why she did it. She feigns ignorance, pretending not to understand what he's talking about. But Calix says he's sure she was afraid of dying, which is why she acted the way she did. This means she doesn't have enough loyalty to lay down her life for Lady Stella. But the girl remains silent. He tells Russell to make her talk. Russell pries her mouth open and sees something in Calix's hand, wondering what it is. But Calix just tosses it into her mouth and she immediately smells something strange. It's probably that same goat milk again, and he orders Russell to make her drink it. She screams in the chair, trying to break free, but it's no use. When Russell lets go, she screams, asking what they made her drink. Calix casually says it was just a little bit of poison. Then he asks if she's familiar with something called Seta's puppet. Terrified, she claims it's impossible, saying there's no way a noble from a family like his could get such a thing. But Calix says that with enough money, you can do whatever you want. To prove it, he mentions that the primary ingredient for the recipe is white radish. Russell seems impressed while Calix just waits for her reaction. Layla insists she doesn't believe him, but the protagonist is certain she's scared out of her mind. She then says she'll leave for now, report to her master, and say the assassination was a success. She questions whether he really thinks she'll follow his orders, but Calix simply asks if she's ready to die. The Seta's puppet poison has over 3,000 different antidotes depending on the formula, and the correct one for what she drank is stored in his mind. So if she doesn't want to die a stupid death, she better listen to him. The girl is breathing heavily, clearly shaken, but he demands her answer. After hesitating for a moment, she shouts that it's fine and asks to be untied. But Calix remarks that she seems awfully angry at the person who's saving her life. She's trembling, almost crying in the chair, begging to be released. Russell finds it strange that she suddenly decided to comply, and there she is, pleading for mercy. Calix knows it's just the spoiled goat milk wreaking havoc in her stomach. She pleads with Russell to untie her, but Russell hesitates, questioning whether Calix has forgotten that she tried to kill him. The boy responds that she's a very valuable witness, and they'll need to treat her with a bit of dignity. Russell has no idea what he's talking about. Meanwhile, she keeps begging to be released. She's on the verge of tears, seemingly about to explode, pleading for freedom. Time passes. She eventually announces that she's leaving to report that the assassination was successful. She leaves the room. Now Calix knows he'll have to deal with someone else who can control all the knights. That person is standing right beside him. Russell then demands to know how Calix obtained all this knowledge. The fool is about to say he learned everything from books, but realizes Russell wouldn't believe that. Russell warns him that explaining such things through a book would be akin to signing a death sentence. Now Calix is unsure what to say. No one will believe him if he claims he's from another world. He then asks Russell if he remembers the dagger he plunged into his own chest. Russell says he does, but wants to know why he's bringing it up. Our boy explains that the dagger is actually an heirloom passed down from his mother. She claimed to possess mysterious powers, and it seems those powers have now awakened within him. Russell doesn't look convinced, but Calix says he never imagined the secret to gaining such knowledge was to strike his own heart. The butler insists that if it were such a rare item, everyone would know about it. Calix thinks for a moment and asks if he's heard of the dagger of Claire. Apparently Russell has, as he asks if the previous lady's dagger really was that artifact. If it was indeed that treasure, it could explain Calix's vast knowledge. However, Russell says there's one issue. He wants to know if anyone else knows about this. Calix assures him that no one does. He's the first. He then asks Russell what he thought about Layla's story, specifically the idea that all of Count Claire's movements, his father's movements, had been leaked. A knight like his father, who was on the verge of advancing in rank, shouldn't have died to a mere monster attack. It's ridiculous to believe such a story. Russell immediately realizes Calix is seeking his help. But in the political games of succession, Russell has no intention of getting involved. However, if the Count's death truly was premeditated, that changes everything. Yet gripping his sword, Russell debates internally. As a soldier, he doesn't want to get entangled in politics. This principle has guided him for 50 years. Just as he's about to express this to Calix, the boy suddenly shouts, demanding to know why his father had to die. All he wants is to understand why his father was murdered and who was behind it, obviously, so he can start planning his revenge. He asked Russell if he isn't curious too. Whoever it was, they already know was someone who stood to benefit from his death, but they can't give up just because the situation seems difficult. He pauses for a moment and asks if it's truly right for a knight to serve a family that orchestrated an assassination. Russell freezes for a moment. Then he kneels and swears loyalty to Calix. Our boy is thrilled, but hears Russell add one caveat. By doing this, he is abandoning the beliefs he held for 50 years, never to involve himself in politics. But Calix is just happy to gain someone so powerful as an ally, especially one invested in the vengeance he seeks. He tells Russell to rise, saying he doesn't need to swear loyalty to someone who doesn't even hold a title. But Russell reassures him, saying he'll ensure the boy grows strong. Our guy quickly changes the subject, not wanting this conversation to lead to Russell suggesting training him. He then says that now that they know about the Countess poisoning attempt, everything is falling into place. They're only at the beginning of their revenge. Russell asks how he can assist. Calix is about to reply when the scene changes. A group of people is gathered around an enormous table. A blonde woman with a fan comments that everyone is finally present. Some people whisper, questioning why the Countess is sitting on the throne. The Countess speaks up, saying that some of them must already know what happened yesterday with Prince Calix. He attempted to end his life using a poison known as slow death. One of the older men says it's the typical choice for those looking to take their own life, and if he consumed it, death was inevitable. Everyone is aware that with Calix's death, the faction he represented has become irrelevant. The Countess is overjoyed by Calix's apparent demise. Now it's certain that Grumbine will assume the Count's seat. This is exactly the question everyone in the room is asking. Some suggest that the Countess take charge temporarily. Meanwhile, in the next room, a boy is getting ready, remarking how things are becoming quite interesting. He calls out to Russell, who declares he'll follow him to the end. Our boy is fully armored, ready for battle. It seems Grumbine is just some chubby kid, likely the son of that scheming woman. Everyone is smiling until someone kicks the door open. Who steps in, everyone? By their shocked faces, you already know. It's Calix with Russell right behind him. The Countess is utterly confused, unable to comprehend why he's alive. Everyone in the room starts whispering the same question. Calix marches up to the Countess and calls her by name. He informs her that the throne she's sitting on does not belong to her. She tries to play it cool, commenting on how energetic he looks and asking how he's feeling. He smiles, saying he drank the poison but luckily survived. Then he warns her that she was far too hasty in her plans. She tells him to calm down and not make baseless accusations. Even though he never acknowledged her as his mother, calling her an assassin is unforgivable. She screams, declaring that in the Grand Hall, one must take responsibility for their words. But Calix responds, saying it's impressive how she remains so dishonest even after being exposed. The Duchess, clueless about what he's planning, asks what he's talking about. Calix simply says that for now, this is the next step. Suddenly, he claps his hands and someone enters the room. Layla walks in and he announces that the witness has something to say. The others in the room have no idea who this woman is, while the Duchess immediately realizes that if it's who she thinks it is, she's in deep trouble. Layla kneels and Calix asks her to state her name. The girl slowly opens her eyes, glances at Grumbine, and introduces herself as Layla. Now the Duchess is panicking, unsure why this girl is here. Layla introduces herself as a shadow operative from the Hoshiran family's Special Operations Unit. Calix commands her to explain. She explains that members of this unit are orphans trained in the Gorda fields. The children who survived were selected and sent to other locations with false identities. He asks if she was working undercover at his castle. She says yes, pretending to be a maid employed by Lady Stella. Calix then asks if she knew her true mission. Layla admits that she did. The Duchess yells, claiming that all of this is a nonsensical conspiracy. Others in the room protest, saying Layla had worked at the castle for 5 years. How could she possibly be a spy? The room erupts with accusations that the Hoshiran family is scheming something. However, others question why Layla would confess to such a thing without reason. The treasurer next to the Duchess starts to panic. He shouts at Russell, demanding to know why he's staying silent. Does he really believe the words of a maid like her? Russell calmly responds that she isn't a maid but a criminal caught in the act. She was forced to admit that she was a spy working for the Hoshiran family. Whether this is a conspiracy or not, it must be judged after hearing her testimony. The treasurer has no good response. Another noble interrupts, telling the treasurer to stop interfering and let the woman speak. The treasurer, angered, asks what he just said, but someone else shouts for everyone to be quiet. The room falls silent, and the Duchess's anger is palpable. Someone asks Layla what her mission was while working for the Hoshiran family. She states it was to gather information. Calix asks what kind of information. She explains that she was tasked with tracking all income and expenses of the territory, noting all travel dates and destinations of the former count, and monitoring the movements of political allies and vassals. Calix then steps forward and asks her what her most recent mission was. She reveals that her orders were to poison Prince Calix with the slow death venom. After his death, she was to place a forged suicide note in his room to make it appear he had taken his own life. Calix, cold and calculated, asks her what the outcome of her mission was. She admits that she successfully poisoned him but was caught by Count Russell when she entered to plant the note. The Duchess screams, demanding that the woman be arrested. Guards rush to seize Layla, who tries to resist, shouting that there's no evidence to back these claims. Calix, looking as composed as ever, calls out to Russell. Russell nods and presents the forged suicide note. He explains that he was in Calix's room when Layla entered to plant the letter. Then he reveals a memory of the Earth Scroll. He reminds everyone that this magic is capable of revealing malicious intentions. With this scroll, they can uncover who ordered Layla to carry out this act. The treasurer realizes that if this evidence is revealed, it's over for all of them. They have to stop it, even if it meant silencing everyone in the room. Calix, noticing the treasurer's tension, smirks, already knowing he tries something drastic. He stretches his arms and calls for the knights to enter. The room fills with the sound of footsteps as an army of knights marches in, positioning themselves behind each noble. Now there was no way to suppress the truth. The treasurer, terrified, demands to know from Russell what this means. Russell explains that after reviewing the scroll's contents, the results were shocking. To prevent disorder and chaos, summoning the knights was the only option. The nobles protest, claiming it's wrong to bring soldiers into the sacred Great Hall. Meanwhile, Grumbine, the chubby hair parent, sits in stunned silence, looking like a fool. The Duchess, realizing the knight's presence means the evidence is irrefutable, knows she's trapped. There's nothing she can do now. Calix then asks Russell what the punishment is for a noble who attempts to kill a member of their own family. Russell replies that it's death by hanging. The Duchess, in desperation, grabs her piggish son and declares he had nothing to do with this. She turns to Calix, pleading, saying that while they aren't related by blood, she is still his mother. She begs him to believe her, but Calix only glances at Layla. With a sly smile, he asks her if this is true. Layla, trembling, reveals that when she received her orders from the Countess, Prince Grumbine was present. Calix smiles and the Duchess falls into despair, screaming and crying, claiming it's all a lie. What's it a lie? Our boy, unfazed, announces that he doesn't care if it's a lie. He's determined to take them both down. After all, she's the one who tried to assassinate him in the first place, making them the true cowards. Looking at her sobbing on the floor, he declares that the fox hunt has now reached its climax. As the Duchess sits there, her jaw practically glued to the table in shock, someone suddenly slams their hand on the table and calls for Calix. Calix looks over. It's the king of McDonald's himself, Grumbine. The Duchess screams for her son, and Calix turns just in time to see the boy beside him. But instead of defending himself, Grumbine kneels, bowing deeply at Calix. The entire room is stunned as Grumbine stares at the floor, like he's searching for ants. The other nobles urge him to stand, demanding to know what's going on. But Grumbane calls out to Calix, saying he'll accept any punishment as long as his mother is spared. The Duchess, confused and panicking, begins screaming at Grumbine to return to his seat. The nobles murmur that things have gone too far, but it's clear Grumbine has crossed a line to save his mother. Calix immediately realizes that if he orders both of them killed now, he'll be seen as the villain. He wonders if this has been Grumbine's plan all along. Despite his anger, he places a hand on Grumbine's shoulder and says it's fine. If he truly cares so much for his mother, Calix has no choice. Grumbine looks up, surprised and hopeful, asking what he means. Calix states that if Grumbane confesses his involvement, he'll request a reduced punishment for his mother, but he warns him to think carefully about what that means. Grumbine hesitates, unsure of what to say, while the Duchess screams at him not to do anything unnecessary. She orders Calix to stop threatening her eldest son, but other nobles interject, blaming her for plotting to kill Calix in the first place. Meanwhile, Grumbine appears lost, unable to understand how everything spiraled so terribly out of control. Calix, growing tired of the chaos, calls for Russell and instructs him to arrest them both. The knights in the corner step forward, surrounding the Duchess. She orders them to stop questioning if they know who she is. But from the side, Grumbine can only watch as his mother is gagged. He clenches his fists. Calix turns to him and asks if he'll take responsibility for the crime of attempting to poison him. Despite his fear, Grumbine, showing unexpected courage, admits to it. Calix had anticipated this. After all, it was the only move Grumbine had left. Impressed by the boy's calculations, Calix declares that since he confessed before the evidence was fully revealed, the family's name will remain untarnished. However, as part of his sentence, Grumbine must seal his mana permanently to prove he won't cause further harm. Grumbine hadn't expected this. In this kingdom, society is divided into classes: nobles, knights, commoners, and slaves. The only way to become a knight is by using mana to strengthen the body. Sealing one's mana is akin to a social death sentence for a noble. Grumbine turns desperately toward his mother, who lies on the floor, confused about what he'll do. If he refuses to seal his mana, his mother will be exposed and hanged, a fate he cannot accept. The Duchess, unable to speak through her gag, shakes her head violently, knowing this punishment is worse than death for a noble. Taking a deep breath, Grumbine stands and agrees to the terms. Russell assures him it will be done. He hands Grumbine a scroll. Grumbine bites into it, pressing his hand against his chest. A golden circle forms over his stomach as mana begins to accumulate, and slowly fades. The Duchess writhes on the floor, desperate for him to stop, knowing not even a grandmaster could undo this. Grumbine tears the scroll away from his chest as Calix watches in silence. The mana continues to dwindle until it vanishes completely. Everyone in the room realizes his mana has been sealed. The Duchess, sobbing uncontrollably, looks defeated, while Grumbine appears content. At least he managed to save his mother. But she lies on the floor, lamenting that it's all over, disappointed in her son's naivety and innocence despite being her biological child. Grumbine turns to his mother, trying to comfort her, saying he's always dreamed of becoming an artist. But the Duchess, biting down on her gag, screams Calix's name in fury. Breaking free of her restraints, she curses Calix and vows to bring ruin to his family for generations. Calix, calm and composed, knows she's powerless now. Her strength will likely amount to no more than Layla's. Grumbine kneels by his mother, gently asking if she's okay. Calix, however, feels a pang of guilt for ruining the future of someone so young. But he reminds himself that it's just a game. There's no room for sympathy. Russell, observing him, seems confused as Calix steels himself for the next step. Now that they've come this far, there's no turning back. Calix orders Russell to proceed with the remaining matters. It's announced that Lady Stella and Prince Grumbine will be confined to an annex, forbidden from any outside contact. The mother and son are escorted out through the door, leaving Calix watching intently. He then approaches the treasurer, accusing him of leaking vital documents. As a result, the treasurer is stripped of his position, imprisoned, and placed under investigation. The old treasurer tries to make excuses, claiming his situation is different. He curses at one of the soldiers, who doesn't appreciate it, and lands a solid punch to his gut. With that, the bald man is dragged away. Calix feels a bit awkward about causing all this chaos, but at least things seem to be working in his favor. The remaining people in the room tremble with fear, terrified they might be punished next. Observing Calix, they begin to realize something. Russell's support means that all the knights are aligned with this prince. In a way, the succession dispute has already ended. Russell's loyalty to Calix is a direct warning to everyone in the room. Calix calls for the head of security, who nervously approaches. Russell steps in, declaring that the man is suspended from all his duties. The security chief has no choice but to accept, while the others in the room grow even more anxious, fearing they might be next. Suddenly, a man seated in the corner apologizes. He admits to failing his duties and asks to be dismissed. Calix, however, knows that this man, Garrett, is one of Russell's trusted allies. Russell immediately denies the resignation, stating firmly that it won't be accepted. Those who want to work don't get to, and those who don't want to will have to, Russell remarks sarcastically. The room prepares a list of all the officials involved in the incident. Garrett is tasked with overseeing their removal. As this unfolds, Calix walks over to Garrett. He informs him that only 4 individuals from the finance department will be exempt from investigation. Clearly, they'll need a lot of new personnel. Garrett advises leniency toward those with minor infractions, warning that removing too many officials at once could disrupt operations. Calix counters, questioning if avoiding investigations for the sake of operations is really a good idea. He argues that granting forgiveness won't be seen as leniency. It will be perceived as weakness. Garrett insists that many of the officials were merely aligned with the wrong side. But Calix interrupts, stating that his decision has already been made. Seeing that the prince won't budge, Garrett concedes. And he can't help but wonder how this once weak boy has become so resolute. The room is aware of Russell's strength and Garrett's intellect. Now both stand by Calix's side, solidifying his position. Our boy smiles, knowing the county is nearly within his grasp. Suddenly, a blue light flashes. It opens the system and declares it's time to use more of his talents. As the system interface appears, he begins analyzing everyone in the room. The glint in his eyes and his crooked smile give him the look of a madman. Calix identifies everyone with ties to opposing factions or ambiguous loyalties. Those individuals are marked for removal. Even the useless ones won't escape his scrutiny. Only those who survive his loyalty test will remain in his future plans. Like the rest of the nobles, I'm sitting here wondering why this kid has such a creepy grin. Some of the others are trembling, knowing that if Calix takes a dislike to them, they're doomed. Desperate, they rush forward, showering him with praise, calling him an incredible leader and begging to speak with him. Calix tells them to calm down, saying they have plenty of free time to discuss things later. Russell watches from the sidelines, still unsure how things turned out like this. Time passes, and we return to the castle. After a day filled with political maneuvers, Calix collapses onto his bed. He's exhausted. He reflects on his past life, where he was average in studies, appearance, and just about everything else. Nothing in his life was terrible, but nothing was particularly great either. It all began to change when he discovered Heroes of Destiny. He wondered if completing something no one else could would finally make him special. He recalls the moment he finished the game and the message declaring him the first human to acquire the seed of the gods. At that moment, he wiped his eyes and wished to be reborn in the continent of Ellen. It was the only way he could continue to feel extraordinary. Now sitting on his bed, he remembers that wish and the game's narrative about being born as an insignificant insignificant soul. The story said he would need to survive turbulent times and become a hero to ascend the throne. He suddenly realizes what's happened. When he completed the game, his wish was granted. But perhaps the deity misunderstood what he truly wanted. Still, it doesn't matter now. There's no turning back. Calyx wonders if completing this game once more will grant him another wish. He began drifting off to sleep, vowing to conquer this world again. The next morning, he wakes up, refreshed and ready for a new day. He ponders where to begin. He remembers certain territories perfectly from the game, but has no idea what Shiken is really like in this world. Calyx decides he needs to check the map to figure out exactly where Shiken is located. The system even provides him with a detailed map. What a beauty. A message pops up, notifying him that he's already conquered the entire continent of Ellen. Since he finished the game once, he now has access to all the map markers. He's ecstatic, realizing this is essentially a treasure map, showing the locations of ruins, dungeons, and hidden secrets. This was one of the bonuses nobody knew existed, as no one else had completed the game. The map even includes information he wasn't aware of himself. With this resource, navigating the world becomes much easier. Then he pauses, wondering what year it is. He checks the imperial calendar and sees it's the year 289. The game Heroes of Destiny begins in 294. This revelation helps him understand Shiken's situation. He inherited a piece of land that in 5 years would somehow vanish. He recalls Russell mentioning the dire state of the finances, and now it makes sense. They are on the brink of collapse. Suddenly, a financial status window appears in front of him. Calyx glances over the details and immediately yells that it's unbelievable. Looking at the current state of affairs, he wonders if the best option is to steal all the money and flee. But he quickly dismisses that idea, realizing land is far more valuable than wealth. It can only be inherited. His first step is to review all financial records. He notices that farm collections aren't significantly lower than in other territories. Defense expenditures haven't risen much either. Time passes as he pores over the documents. A few hours later, he slams the papers onto the table, exclaiming that he's exhausted. Analyzing 10 years of territorial finances is too much for him. However, he identifies a major problem. The trade route with the Medrosa Desert has been severed. Apparently, another nation established a more lucrative trade route, drawing merchants away. What puzzles him is how they managed to fund such a large-scale project. On top of that, the annual debts are growing faster than their yearly income. Statistics alone aren't enough to solve this mystery. He needs more information. Frustrated, he rubs his head until an idea sparks. He remembers the old man from the meeting, the treasurer Gidris, who was caught embezzling funds. At the moment, Gidris is locked up in the dungeons. The scene shifts to Calyx descending into the cells. A guard station at the entrance asks what Prince Calyx is doing there. Calyx requests to see Gidris, pinching his nose at the overwhelming stench of the place. As they walk, the guard remarks that he never imagined the prince would visit such a place. Calyx remembers this guard from the meeting, a type who submits easily to power. He calls out to the guard, who nervously responds. Calyx, knowing the guard lacks authority, asks if innocent people should have their names cleared. The guard agrees enthusiastically, saying the prince is absolutely correct. Calyx continues, suggesting that criminals who don't deserve freedom should also be reinvestigated. The guard salutes, claiming he understands perfectly. Though Calyx doesn't fully grasp why this man abandoned his previous loyalty to work with him, he decides to use him for now. He reminds the guard not to address him as Lord just yet, as he hasn't officially taken the title. The guard apologizes, calling him Prince again. Feeling slightly awkward for enforcing formalities so hard, Calyx simply orders the guard to lead him to Gidris. Moments later, they arrive at Gidris' cell. Inside, Gidris complains about the disgusting food, declaring that he'll be out soon anyway. Suddenly, Calyx appears, asking how exactly Gidris plans to escape. What incredible plan does he have up his sleeve? Gidris turns, smiling confidently, and says he's been waiting for the prince. He claims Calyx owes him a favor. Confused, Calyx retorts that he owes Gidris nothing. The only thing he'll ensure is that the rope for his hanging is strong enough not to snap. But Gidris, far from stupid, argues that while he may be in prison now, he's the only person with 20 years of experience managing Shiken's finances. If the prince is visiting him, it must be for that reason. Calyx reminds him that he lost his financial position, but Gidris counters by asking if he's curious about the root of Shiken's massive debt. Calyx's anger flares as the smug treasurer seems oblivious to his situation. Meanwhile, Gidris grins arrogantly. Suddenly, Calyx calls for the guard and asks if there's a torture expert on hand. The guard hesitates but confirms they have one. Calyx orders him to fetch the expert. When the guard hesitates again, Calyx yells, asking if it looks like he's joking. Terrified, the guard scrambles to comply, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. Fuming, Calyx decides Gidris needs to understand how things are handled in this territory. Gidris quickly realizes that if a torture expert gets involved, he's in real trouble. Calyx remarks that someone like Gidris probably doesn't have much tolerance for pain. Calyx smirks and wishes Gidris good luck. If your resilience impresses me, he says, maybe I'll let you hang slowly instead of all at once. Gidris is taken aback. This kid is far more serious than he expected. He immediately begins begging for mercy, pleading that he has valuable information that could bring great profit to the territory. Calyx, unimpressed, tells him to start talking. Gidris begins explaining how the debts of Shiken came to be. All the major debts of this territory are tied to a merchant named Gerard Merces, Gidris says. Apparently, Gerard manages a secret vault for the Hoshurin family. The Hoshurins use Gerard to avoid paying royal taxes on mining operations. But Calyx interrupts, asking why not just report Gerard to the royal family and shift the debt onto him, or perhaps sell the debt rights before arresting him. Gidris seems stunned, clearly impressed by the suggestion. That's an incredible plan, he stammers, one I hadn't considered. Before Gidris can elaborate, the guard suddenly returns, announcing that he's brought the territory's best torture expert. Calyx lights up with excitement, while Gidris begins pleading more desperately for mercy. I know where Gerard's secret vault is, he blurts out. This catches Calyx's attention for a moment, but before he can react, the torturer shoves Gidris to the ground, telling him to keep quiet. Gidris continues to insist, shouting that he's telling the truth. He's worked in Shiken for so long that he's the only one who knows the vault's location. Calyx steps on Gidris' face with his boot, commanding him to speak. Where exactly is the secret vault? Gidris hesitates, clearly trying to stall. Calyx growls, start talking. The torturer cracks his knuckles, saying breaking fingers one by one is always a good start. Panicked, Gidris admits that he once tried to rob the vault but failed. Calyx immediately deduces that Gidris didn't act alone. The old man confirms this, explaining that he paid some bandits in gold bars to help him. How much did you pay? Calyx demands. For 300, Calyx interrupts incredulous. No, 3,000, Gidris finishes weakly. Hearing this, Calyx bursts into laughter. The the sound echoing ominously through the dungeon. The guard outside the cell gulps nervously. He knows that when the prince reacts this way, it's never good. Calyx composes himself, his voice icy. 3,000 gold? That's the annual revenue of this territory. Where did you get that kind of money? He accuses Gidris of embezzling funds from Shikin's treasury. Gidris bows his head to the ground, confessing that he had no choice. The opportunity was too tempting, he says. If it weren't for that cursed magic crystal orb, I would have succeeded. Calyx narrows his eyes. What's this about a magic crystal orb? Gidris explains that the orb was used to access the vault. He adds that duplicating the orb cost him 2,500 gold. Calyx begins piecing things together. You were scammed, he says flatly. The bandits and Gerard Merces were likely working together. Gidris shakes his head, insisting it's impossible. I saw it with my own eyes. Gerard used the orb to open the vault door. Calyx orders Gidris to reveal the vault's location. It's in the highlands of Gorda, Gidris says. Calyx opens his map, and while Gidris admits he was blindfolded during his attempt, he's confident the vault is in that region. The prince pauses, deep in thought. Everyone around him wonders why he's just standing there, staring at nothing. Focusing on the map, Calyx deduces a potential area to investigate. He realizes he needs someone familiar with the highlands of Gorda. Remembering Layla's comment that her orphan squad was trained in Gorda, he formulates a plan. Calling for the guard, he announces they're leaving. Gidris, desperate, shouts after him, demanding to know where he's going. But Calyx leaves without answering while the guard slams the cell door shut. Walking away, Calyx can't help but think about the 3,000 gold Gidris stole, and how this guard likely pocketed his share. His fury grows as he contemplates it further. He suddenly stops and calls for Shu, the guard. Startled, Shu nervously asks what he needs. Calyx casually mentions the 3,000 gold Gidris stole, asking if Shu knew about it. Shu, feigning ignorance, vehemently denies any knowledge. Calyx smirks and starts walking away. I overheard something interesting from Gidris while you were out, he says cryptically. I'm a generous person, but there are things I simply can't overlook. He leaves Shu sweating, unsure if the prince knows more than he's letting on. Calyx's mind races with possibilities, yet he remains outwardly composed. For now, he's in a dilemma, but he knows this is just the beginning. The guard collapses to the ground, wailing that the damned pig Gidris must have revealed everything while he was away. Desperate, he begs for forgiveness, promising never to betray anyone again. But Calyx doesn't respond. It's only when the guard looks up that he realizes the prince has already left. However, the guard shrugs it off, shifting his anger toward Gidris. Determined to take revenge, he bolts toward the dungeon. Meanwhile, Calyx is leaning casually behind a well, smirking to himself. Suddenly, someone approaches from behind, catching his attention. He turns, raising an eyebrow, and asks who the person is. By their attire, he identifies them as a knight from the Order of the Blue Lion. He asks what the knight is doing here. The knight introduces himself as Krot Solemn, explaining that Lord Russell assigned him to accompany the prince. Calyx acknowledges this, immediately activating his system to analyze Krot's stats. To his surprise, Krot is 26 years old, a senior knight level 52, and classified as S rank, a remarkable warrior. Calyx is impressed, wondering why someone of this caliber wasn't part of Heroes of Destiny. The name Krot Solemn doesn't ring any bells, leading Calyx to suspect he must have died early in the game's timeline. With a potential score exceeding 700, Krot could have easily been among the top 100 strongest individuals on the continent. His military ranking combined with his raw power makes him a formidable asset. Calyx muses that Krot might even be connected to the infamous Messenger of Death, a character in the game who slaughtered enemies mercilessly, never revealing his face. But Krot's cheerful demeanor and muscular physique don't align with the thin, sinister figure described in the game. Deciding not to dwell on it further, Calyx acknowledges that having someone like Krot around is beneficial regardless of his past. Krot calls out to the prince, snapping him from his thoughts, and comments that he must have been daydreaming since he'd been muttering Krot's name repeatedly. Before Calyx can reply, Krot informs him that a merchant named Gerard Merces has requested an audience. Hearing this, Calyx's eyes narrow. Gerard Merces, the very name Gidris had mentioned earlier, the man to whom Shikin owed its crippling debt and the only one with access to the mysterious secret vault. Now things are getting interesting. Calyx strides forward, beckoning Krot to follow. As they walk through the corridors, Calyx observes Krot's slightly clumsy demeanor and concludes it's impossible for him to be the Messenger of Death. A short time later, they arrive at a meeting room. Calyx steps inside, greeted by Gerard, who places a hand on his chest and introduces himself as the head of a small trading company. Calyx responds politely, remarking that he's heard of Gerard's well-respected reputation in business. Talented merchants like you are always welcome, he adds. Gerard bows deeply, thanking the prince for his kind words. Calyx cuts to the chase, asking why a successful merchant like Gerard would seek a meeting with someone like him. I currently hold no official position of authority, Calyx points out. If this is about business, I have no jurisdiction over territorial matters. Gerard chuckles awkwardly, admitting that while it's true Shikin is currently managed by Count Russell, the territory's future belongs to Calyx. There's no one in Shikin who opposes your decisions, Prince Calyx, Gerard says confidently. Calyx, maintaining his humility, counters, don't overestimate me. I'm just one of two hairs, nothing more. Krot laughs, pointing out that Calyx is being far too modest. Everyone knows the succession has already been decided, even if it hasn't been formally announced. Gerard nods, admitting that such rumors align with what he's heard. The merchant apologizes if his words were presumptuous. Calyx notes that Gerard is undeniably a capable businessman. After all, someone without access to vital information wouldn't survive in this line of work. However, Gerard finds himself puzzled. The prince before him doesn't match the rumors of a knave and foolish boy. The person he sees is sharp, calculating, and far more mature than expected. Still, Gerard compliments Calyx's striking appearance, admitting that the rumors about his beauty weren't exaggerated. Blushing, Gerard remarks that Calyx is exactly his type. Feeling an ominous intent behind Gerard's words, Calyx abruptly stands, his voice firm. I don't like wasting time, he declares. If you don't get to the point, I'm leaving. Gerard immediately apologizes, realizing he can't afford to lose this meeting. Though he's captivated by the prince's charm, his priority is securing a working relationship with him. Seated once more, Calyx watches Gerard carefully and orders him to speak directly. Gerard explains that he wants to support the prince, but his primary reason for being here is the massive debt left by the previous count. Feigning ignorance, Calyx claims he's never heard of such a a debt. The guy managing finances is in prison for his crimes, he adds nonchalantly. Krot, standing nearby, cringes at Calix's casual nose-picking, finding it utterly distasteful. Unfazed, Gerard smirks, having anticipated this response. He knows that Calix is far from clueless, and this conversation is just getting started. Gerard begins explaining with a sly smile. This all started just 5 years ago, so it's impossible you don't know about it. He beams, thinking this is the moment he's been waiting for. He envisions the despair on this adorable little prince's face, the fear when confronted with a monumental debt. Gerard is eager to watch Calix break down into tears, his face twisting in helplessness. He continues, according to the terms of the 3-year contract, the payment can be demanded at any time. It's unfortunate, but I must inform you, in 2 weeks, 60,000 gold coins must be paid. Krot freezes at the number, visibly shocked, while Calix remains calm, his expression unreadable. Gerard assumes the prince is pretending to stay composed, finding his attempt at stoicism absolutely delightful. He revels in the sight, continuing his internal monologue. Stop flirting with my protagonist, Gerard. Where are the wafers? Calix, however, says nothing. Krot finally speaks up, nervously asking Gerard to consider postponing the payment date. But Gerard quickly dismisses the idea. Silence falls between them. Breaking it, Gerard says with mock pity. It's truly unfortunate, but Shiken's territory has been declining rapidly. We've shown goodwill by waiting over a year for recovery, but nothing changed. Now that Prince Calix is taking charge, he'll need to repay this courtesy. Calix recognizes Gerard's facade of generosity, noting how cleverly he masks his extortion behind politeness. The prince rises, nonchalantly remarking, perhaps you're unaware, but Shiken's annual revenue exceeds 6,000 gold coins. Finding someone willing to lend 60,000 gold won't be an issue. Krot's confusion deepens, unable to believe such a claim. Gerard stands, feigning delight. That's excellent news. It seems there's nothing to worry about then. But inside, Gerard knows how difficult it is to secure connections for such an amount. He announces he'll return soon to collect the payment and leaves, confident this territory will soon fall into his grasp. As he leans into bow, Gerard's thoughts turn sinister. Soon enough, this pampered noble brat will be groveling at my feet. Maybe I'll sell him at the slave market, but not before enjoying my prize. He departs, thanking Calix and wishing him good fortune. Calix watches him leave, unfazed, while Krot stands there trying to process what just happened. Krot blurts out, 60,000 gold? How can you stay so calm about this? Calix, already planning his next move, knows the secret vault in Gorna holds the answer. The map had already marked ruins and treasures in the region. The challenge now lies in navigating the dangerous continent of Ellen. The highlands of Gorda are particularly perilous, home to intelligent creatures like the Riskath. It's a region people avoid at all costs. Outside the castle, Krot asks Calix what he plans to do next. Calix smirks, knowing it's time to find someone who knows Gorda well, someone like Layla. The scene shifts to a guard stationed outside a holding area. He spots Calix and nervously greets him. The prince compliments the guard's work and asks to see the prisoner. Krot decides to go ahead while Calix handles this. When the door opens, Calix is surprised by how organized the room looks. Clean up a bit, someone remarks. It's none other than Layla, towering confidently as always. Finally, she's back after all the bizarre encounters with Gerard. Calix compliments her appearance, saying she looks great. With a smirk, she arrogantly responds, of course I do, just as you can see. Krot warns her to watch her tone when speaking to the prince, but Layla and Calix merely exchange knowing looks. She brings up the poison he gave her, saying it was from Cetis marionette, wasn't it? You tricked me. Calix is impressed, admitting she figured it out faster than he expected. Sitting at the table, she asks why he's here. Do you mean me for something? I can already tell you do. She leans in seductively, saying, I don't follow your orders anymore, but if we share a very intimate moment together, I might consider it. Krot immediately tells her to hold her insolent tongue. Calix, unfazed, cuts to the chase. I'm here to give you a chance to survive. Intrigued, Layla asks for more details. Calix explains that the moment she's released, she'll be killed. Layla seems confused, prompting Calix to elaborate. She should already know the Shiken family is at odds with the Hoshurans. That's obvious, Layla replies. You forced the only heir of Hoshuran to seal his mana. Calix nods, stating she was instrumental in that success and should understand the danger she faces. Finally, it clicks for her. The Hoshurans will want me dead because of my testimony, won't they? Exactly. Calix confirms. Restoring Grumbind's mana is impossible, and without it, the Hoshurans have no chance of conquering Shiken. No noble allows someone who derailed their plans to live, especially someone like you. Layla, having worked for nobles for years, had witnessed many of them being killed like dogs, but she never thought it would happen to her. Suddenly, she lunges across the table, grabbing Calix. Krot immediately tenses, ready to intervene. Layla leaps toward the prince, shouting, die. Calix, caught off guard, looks genuinely alarmed. Krot, however, won't let anything happen to his charge. That in the moment he comes stomping with his big foot and slams her against the wall, calling her a filthy assassin and asking how she dares to challenge the young lord like that. Calix thanks her but says there's no need to humiliate the poor girl so much. After all, it was thanks to her that he secured his position as the next lord. He then tells her that normally those who help someone wake up to reality tend to be more hated than those who drive people into despair. And the reason for this is because it's easier that way. Many people believe that living in a lie is better, even just for a moment. But he smiles at her and says that considering how motivated she seems to survive, she doesn't seem like that type of person. She says she's not and shouts, warning that she wouldn't die under any circumstances. He then smiles and says that if that's the case, he has a way to make her useful. If she helps him with the work he needs done, she will also receive protection in the meantime. And if she has a family, you would take care of them too. However, Layla misunderstands and asks if, by any chance, he's threatening her family. He stands up with that dumbfounded look on his face. He tells her not to misunderstand because if he wanted to, he would have killed her already. Assassins like her are everywhere. The girl knows that's true. To a noble like him, she is nothing more than a tool. He then asks why he wants her and not someone else. There must be some reason he's going through all this trouble to persuade her. Our guy says the first reason is because it would be too much work to find someone else, and the other is because of something she said to him earlier. He then leaves, saying that before explaining why, he would give her a minute. If she didn't agree with him within that time, she'd be free to pursue the freedom she so craved. However, Layla knows the truth is that this freedom will cost her life. Here's her only option because leaving that place she'll be killed by the other family. She didn't want to agree with that cute little runt, but at this moment, she had no choice. And with great determination, she says she understands. Considering the conflict between the two families, she benefits more by helping Shiken. Our boy smiles and says that she's finally starting to think straight. However, she puts her hand on her waist and says she's not going to be a subordinate. She wants to be hired as a regular mercenary instead, and she wouldn't accept a runt like him bossing her around. Suddenly, Krot jumps in and orders her to start respecting the young master. She apologizes and says she's just joking now that they're on the same team. There's no need for him to act like that. Or is he the type of person who liked hitting his allies? Poor Krot just gets even angrier, and the two start to clash again. Suddenly, Calyx asks her about something she mentioned the other day, the Hoshiran family training grounds located in the lands of Golda. She remembers saying that to him and asks what this information has to do with anything. But Calyx interrupts her and tells Krot that he needs a map of the entire area surrounding those grounds, because the little map he has only he can see in the small window. Krot says there's a giant map in the military council area. He pushes our boy, telling him to go. However, looking back, he sees that our guy is just standing there, grinning at the front. Krot immediately asks if, by any chance, he doesn't know the way, and Calyx says he does know, but he prefers having someone protect him from the front. Meanwhile, Layla is standing there with a dumbfounded look, not understanding their bickering. Sometime later in the castle, they finally arrive in the war room. Our boy is all gleaming as he looks around, and Krot says that all the greatest military secrets of the continent of Elen are there. Our boy starts looking for the lands of Golda. Upon finding it, he asks if they know about that place. Krot says it's a well-known area. There's an ongoing territorial dispute between the Hoshiran family and the Baron of the Erebon family. The reason for the conflict is some high-quality copper mines. Our boy asks if Baron Erebon is on their side, and the guy confirms it. He then makes a dumbfounded face, wanting to know how accurate and updated the map is. Layla says it seems a bit outdated, but there haven't been significant changes. At that moment, however, she realizes why she was brought there. Our boy then asks if she can navigate just by looking at the map, and she says of course. She spent her entire childhood playing in that region, but she wants to know why he's so interested in the lands of Golda. He explains that there are some ancient ruins he intends to explore. She looks a bit confused and says there's nothing like that in that place. Calyx looks thoughtful and asks if, by chance, adults didn't talk about places where she shouldn't go. She pauses and then says she remembers something like that. At this, Calyx asks when the Hoshiran family started training troops there. She says she doesn't understand why he's asking, but since she's of the 6th rank, at least 15 years have passed. He asks when the territorial dispute began. Krot says that also started 15 years ago. At this, Layla suddenly nudges him, asking if he understands where the boy is going with this. He replies that he doesn't, and she feels devastated to have an idiot beside her. Once again, they start bickering, until Calyx interrupts them and says that training an army costs a lot of money. They wouldn't have started creating those troops out of nowhere without an important reason. Once again, the dumb girl asks what the boy's point is, and Krot tells her to realize quickly that this means that somehow they managed to obtain a lot of money. Calyx says that's exactly it. 15 years ago, the Hoshiran family found a new source of income, and they likely used that money to train their new armies. Once the troops were ready, they were dispatched to numerous territories, exactly as happened with Layla. She says she understands, but what would be the connection between that source of money and the ruins he's looking for? Calyx says that silver mines are often found alongside copper mines. Besides that, some copper ores can also contain traces of silver. Krot asks if he's suggesting that the Hoshiran family is secretly mining silver, and that would be an extremely serious crime. Calyx says yes and tells him to think about it. The law of this place stated that any gold or silver found always belonged to the royal family, no matter where it was located. However, it would be foolish to believe that every noble would be that fair. Krot asks what the connection to the ruins is, and our boy says he already knows what kind of ruins they are. Perfect ones to hide this type of secret. Unfortunately, he can't reveal to Krot that he already has some information about this. Layla, who's really growing into a sharp girl, asks what all of this has to do with him. She thought it was impossible for him to attack that place because Shikin's territory didn't have the resources for that. Krot gets frustrated, thinking that, as much as he hates to hear it, this is the truth. And she insists, saying that even if they started a war, as soon as the royal family knew it was pure silver, they'd take everything. Calyx says they wouldn't gain anything by passing this information to someone else. Besides, his territory is on the verge of collapse. Both of them stand there dumbfounded, wanting to know what he's suggesting then. That's when he says that since they obtained the money illegally, even if they stole everything, the Hoshirans wouldn't dare report it to the crown. Later that same day at night, they gathered outside the castle. Russell told our boy that it was madness to take someone as inexperienced as Krot on this mission. He should think more about this plan because acting hastily could be dangerous. Calyx agrees that it would be safer with Russell at his side, but a young talent like Krot also needed to develop. The poor fool blushes at the Lord's confidence in him. Calyx continues, saying that it would be too risky for both of them to leave the territory at a time like this. Russell is surprised and then apologizes. Suddenly, he turns to Krot and tells him he'd better follow the young master diligently. But the fool just agrees with his tongue hanging out. Even Russell gives him a smack on the head, telling him to take it seriously. Sometime later, he calls everyone together. He explains that the young master's wounds are still fresh, but even so, he planned this expedition for the good of the territory. So all the soldiers there better follow him faithfully. Calyx knows that no soldier wants to follow someone so weak who once tried to take his own life. Gaining the loyalty of those people was also his job. Meanwhile, Layla is just quietly observing from the corner. Sometime later, they approach a well. Krot goes down and our boy follows right behind him. Upon reaching the bottom, he says that by following this tunnel, they would be able to exit the castle. However, it was farther than he had imagined. Calyx just passes by and tells them to hurry up. With that, the team begins walking through the darkness of the cave. Sometime later, Krot looks up and says they finally arrived. Obviously, our boy is exhausted. Krot opens the cover and offers his hand to help our boy up. Suddenly, he finds himself on the outside, or rather inside, a house. Krot explains that this is an old water mill that had been abandoned a long time ago. Already outside, our boy is impressed. He had already prepared several supply horses. Krot calls him Lord and tells him to get on the horse, but Calyx tells him to stop using that kind of title in this place. It would be stupid to call him Lord outside the castle when they're heading toward hostile territory. From now on, he's to call him only Young Master. The army guys put on peasant clothes, but he's still not sure if that's enough to fool fool anyone. At that, he calls for Krot and asks if he prepared everything he requested. He says yes, but seems a bit hesitant. He pulls out his stinky cloak and asks if he really has to wear something like this. Our boy says that if he wants, he can wear a porter's outfit, but then Calix will have to play the role of Layla's new lead husband. Krot immediately says there's no way he's letting the young lord stand next to an assassin. When he says that, everyone turns to stare at her. Calix realizes the fool is talking more than he should again. He stomps off angrily while thinking that he didn't say a single lie. But since Calix asked, he gives her his hand and asks if my lady would go with him. But she just tells him to stop calling her that and to get out of the way. Calix notices that the two of them don't have the best relationship. Somehow, he needed to calm down his team members. That's because a duo like this would be very useful if they had synergy. But if they kept fighting each other, things would only escalate. Eventually, one would die or leave the team. It's strange how Heroes of Destiny, which was supposed to be just a simple game, felt so real at that moment. He also needed somehow to help Layla prove herself to the rest of the group. Maybe he needed to do something secretly. At that, he tells Krot for them to hurry up and put as much distance between them and the castle before dawn. Krot calls everyone, and the wagons begin moving through the forest. They sleep on the ground, they pass through the forest. They stop at a small shop, they pass through a town. They cross the barrier, they sleep in the forest again. Sometime later, everyone is sitting around a campfire. Krot says that this was the last rural village they would pass through. Calix then orders everyone to prepare because the real fight would begin tomorrow. Morning comes. He warns everyone that now the real work is about to start. Everyone is already in armor, and they move out. Once again, they're on the wagons, following the path. However, Krot's expression changes. He tells our boy that some of the scouts are already returning. A man reports that in the forest just ahead, there's a group of Sasquatches. Krot asks how many there are. The man says 5, and suddenly someone taps him on the shoulder. Turning around, it's Calix, asking him to lift him into the tree. The man gives a peculiar smile, grabs him by the waist, and jumps up happily. From up in the tree, Calix observes the monsters' camp. From afar, he can see the shelter, full of apes carrying skeletons. It's clearly not going to be easy. At that, Calix asks what the plan is. Krot says they'll probably bombard them with flaming arrows. But our boy looks scared, asking if he's insane for suggesting something like that. Layla is nearby, listening to everything. Krot apologizes, but says that this is the safest way to preserve the subordinates' lives. They couldn't risk trying something different. However, Calix knows that no one in this world knows more about these creatures than he does. But right now, he has no way to convince the soldiers. Krot grabs him and climbs down from the tree, saying he'll try to think of a more critical plan. While Calix is thinking of a way to convince not only Krot, but the others, Layla is there quietly listening. She sees some of the guys reviewing the plan they'll follow, and she immediately realizes that their plan is garbage. Basically, it's to try and kill the apes, and that's it. Calix knows that if he makes a suggestion and they don't follow it correctly, things will only get worse. Layla observes him as he watches everyone, trying to find a way to prove himself to these people. While he's standing by the wagon, Layla shows up, saying she wants to discuss something. She warns that the plan will fail, and all the members will die. Even if Krot survives, not everyone is as capable as him. Calix says he already knows that. She then wants to know why he's silent and not telling anyone anything. He tries to explain that he's not silent. He's just trying to think of a way to convince the subordinates. Suddenly, Layla says she has an idea, and he tells her to go ahead. She explains that Sasquatches are very attached to their young. That means if they attack the females and children, the males will definitely come to protect them. The monster's retaliation would only start once they're 100% sure the children are safe. Of course, our boy already knew this and asks what the rest of the plan is. She finds it strange that he doesn't react and says she first needs to know something. The plan was just to pass through quietly and not necessarily kill the creatures. He says yes, since the goal lies elsewhere. She explains that if that's the case, then there is another method. At the moment, the creatures are blocking the path because they think it's safe there. But if they attack the females and children, the front line will be drawn away. Our boy had already thought of this, but there's just one detail missing. He asks her who will do it. Who's going to be the one to attack the creatures alone and draw them all away? He yells, warning that this is basically a suicide mission. But out of nowhere, she says she'll do it, and he looks a bit confused. He explains that since the beginning when she suggested it, he intended to take the role himself. He then asks if, by any chance, she's planning to use a certain herb. She looks confused and asks how he knew about that. He says it's obvious, because otherwise she wouldn't accept a suicidal mission like this. He then says that lately he's changed a lot out of nowhere. Suddenly, he starts coughing, saying that if it works, it's not a bad plan. She then thumps her chest and tells him not to worry. She spent a lot of time there as a child, so there's no way it'll go wrong. Calix then asks why she's going so far to help him. She simply replies that if the Shikin family dies, she dies too. Our boy warns that it'll be hard for her to gain recognition from the others and asks if she's okay with that. She seems to agree, and he says okay then. But before she leaves, he wants to help with something. She asks what it is, and he points to the horizon. He asks her what's over there, and if she knows the region. She says yes and tells him to ask anything. She knows everything about that place. He then points to a specific spot, and she says that about there, she's certain. It's a camp for some goblins and also a hunting ground for the Sasquatches. Our boy thanks her, saying he can always depend on her. He's only doing this to make her feel more useful and calmer, and she simply says that she's happy to help. They continue chatting, and Krot watches from a distance. The two are having a small conversation, with her giggling and blushing. Our boy starts blushing too, and suddenly she reaches out her hand to his face. Man, this assassin is here to kill once again. Our boy is red. When he closes his eyes and opens them again, he realizes she was just pulling a leaf out of his hair. He turns completely red, not even understanding why he's acting like this himself. It's probably because he spent his entire life as an isolated otaku. Then Krot appears, asking what's going on there. Our boy tells him to get lost and says it's nothing. Then he tells the guy to prepare Layla's equipment. He also says that she'll be on a mission, so nobody should ask questions if she disappears. Krot wants to know about the mission because he doesn't trust her. But Calix says to trust him. He trusts her, and they're on the same side. The knight doesn't want to accept it, but says that just this once, he'll understand. Layla drops something on the ground and tells them not to worry because she already has her own equipment. Everyone looks looks at her, a bit embarrassed. Man, this assassin really is dangerous. What's up with her walking around like that? Calyx is practically exploding while Krot asks what this is. She puts on her gauntlets and her boots. Let's admit it, the lower part around the glutes is missing just a bit of armor. She then takes something in her hand and starts smearing it on her face. Apparently, it's that herb meant to distract the Sasquatches. Obviously, it stinks like hell and Krot pinches his nose shut. Meanwhile, Layla doesn't care at all about her outfit with the people staring at her because of the smell. What matters to her is completing this mission. Her concerns were unnecessary. Calyx then asks the prince if they can start the plan, and he says she should take some soldiers with her. But she's certain they wouldn't listen to her orders, so it's better not to. He responds that if that's the case, then she's free. With that, she gracefully jumps from branch to branch. Krot turns around saying that they need to move forward as well. The army advances through the forest and Krot declares that they'll finish this in one strike. Everyone is ready, but Calyx is still feeling insecure about this fight. One of the Sasquatches notices something, and when it turns, Krot is leaping toward it. He manages to land the first cut, but it's too shallow. Calyx wonders why he slashed in a situation where he should have tried to stab. And Krot is quickly covered by the shadow of the Sasquatch, which unleashes a flurry of punches. He's thrown far away, and the fool was grinning, saying that this fight is much more exciting than on the PC. Suddenly, the ape starts beating its chest, and everyone looks confused. A huge flock of birds is heard around, and more of them start approaching. Calyx already realizes that maybe burning down the entire forest wouldn't have been such a bad idea after all. While Krot charges ahead enthusiastically, calling out to the Blue Lion Legion, our boy yells for them to wait and not leave him alone. At that moment, a guy named Albu and another named Thomas step in front, telling him not to stray far. The army begins fighting the apes. Krot prepares, charges his blade with energy, and leaps toward them, declaring that he'll end this now. Before the monster can react, he slashes it, and a blast of energy hits the ape. The entire forest is overtaken by the explosion. As the smoke starts to settle, Krot is already getting exhausted, but apparently he managed to take down the first Sasquatch. He stands proudly looking back. Meanwhile, our boy wonders why this idiot is enjoying the fight so much. But then he's startled when another Sasquatch is seen pounding one of the knights. The knight's sword falls to the ground and he runs to retrieve it, but the monster comes to stomp on his back. At the last second, dear Krot arrives with a kick to the beast's mouth. He tells the knight to grab his sword, and the guy thanks him for saving him. Krot keeps fighting but realizes that killing them one at a time is going to be very difficult. That's because, seeing the soldier's situation, things were extremely dangerous. He manages to slash another arm and the giant beast roars. The problem is that he's only one man and is starting to get exhausted. Not to mention, even the older apes were stronger than he expected. He decides to try immobilizing some of them and slides under a leg, slashing at its heel. The beast roars and another one goes down. The soldiers get excited, seeing that they have a chance to win. But Krot knows something is wrong. Looking around the forest, they see 8, but there's still one missing. That's when he hears a sound beside him. There's a giant albino one charging toward the prince. And the worst part is that the monster is running and Calyx has no way to escape. Krot rushes, but Albu steps in front, telling the prince to stay back. From a distance, Krot unleashes another lightning attack, and everyone is momentarily blinded. But as the smoke clears, a hand bursts out of it. It strikes Albu in the chest, sending him flying and leaving a crater in the ground. Calyx is shocked, realizing that should have been him. Thomas steps in front, telling the prince not to move. Meanwhile, the monster keeps advancing and Krot is starting to get exhausted. He leaps for another attack while Thomas stays by the prince's side, until Calyx calls out to him, saying he needs to help deal with his Sasquatch. Otherwise, everyone will die. But Thomas didn't want to leave the prince's side because it was too risky. However, Calyx warns him that no one is coming to save them, so if they have a chance to win, it's now. He grabs the knight's arm and says that if more soldiers die, they'll be at a numerical disadvantage. Thomas knows this, but as a knight, he can't abandon the prince just like that, until Calyx yells, asking how long he plans to defy orders. Hearing that, Thomas realizes he has no choice. In the end, the knight has to follow the lord's orders, and he says he'll obey. Calyx thanks him and then runs off. He follows the crater until he gets close to Albu. Obviously, the poor guy is in bad shape on the ground, and Calyx is horrified at the sight. With one attack, he had lost his arm, and his armor was completely crushed. He approaches, telling the guide not to lose consciousness because he's going to stop the bleeding. He pours a potion into his mouth, but he knows it's not enough. When he removes the armor, he sees that the guy's stomach is a crater. The Sasquatches punch and hit directly, leaving him with massive internal bleeding. The problem is that these low-level potions aren't enough. They need a healer as soon as possible. He grabs the guy's sword and tells him to stay awake. He'll come back as fast as possible and make sure he survives. Shortly after, in another part of the forest, he hides behind a tree, observing the Sasquatches. This was the hunting region for goblins that Layla had mentioned. But just glancing at them, he's terrified to see the beasts pounding their chests. The monsters were much stronger and more disgusting than he had imagined. He punches the tree, thinking that he really could die here. He's afraid, even though he wants to trust Layla's plan and is sure she set up the traps. If everything goes right, he won't get hurt, but this isn't the world where he's sitting behind a monitor. Breathing heavily, he remembers Albu lying there. He tells himself it's fine. He won't die. He steels himself, saying that he'll do this, and then steps out from behind the tree. He calls out to the Sasquatches, shouting that today is their day to die. The ape charges at him, but suddenly he pulls a lever and several spears strike from behind. They stab right into the beast's ribs, and it drops to the ground immediately. But as soon as the first one fell, another monster noticed and came running toward him. Calyx barely dodges the attack and manages to pull another lever. This time, a rope swings down, slamming the giant beast into the ground. These were extremely sharp spider vines. Additionally, he had asked Layla to coat the spikes with mermaid venom, an incredibly strong anesthetic. Seeing how weak the ape is now, he believes it worked. He steps closer, grabs the sword, and strikes it right in the middle of the head. The feeling of the blade piercing the skull was so much different than in the game. When he pulls the sword out, he's showered in ketchup. The whole thing was disgusting. He never imagined he'd have to go this far, but there he was taking the creature's lives. He then moves to the other beasts and strikes again, saying that they're detestable. But while he's having his little monologue, a goblin is watching from above. The monster sneaks up on him from behind, and there's no time to react. Blood spurts, and when he turns, someone had jumped in front of him. He falls to the ground as the goblin approaches. When he looks to the side, It had been Albu who had once again saved him. Man, this guy really isn't in good shape. Calyx is consumed by rage and charges at the goblin. He tries to slash, but the little green creature ducks and he misses the attack. The monster sidesteps and almost clashes him. He barely avoids it, but his shirt is torn. He realizes he only survived because the creature's arms are short. With another swing of his sword, his hand is shaking from how weak his body is. He tries to calm down, at least he has twice the reach of the creature. As long as he doesn't let it get close, he has a chance to win. Suddenly, the goblin lunges at him again. This time he swings the sword and grazes its ear. He's about to get stabbed when he manages to dodge to the side. He realizes he almost lost an arm. Before he can recover, the monster is already coming at him again. Another slash and another nick on its ear. Again, the goblin goes for his shoulder, but this time he kicks its hand. The moment the creature is disarmed, he screams for it to die and drives the blade into its chest. He's exhausted as the creature's legs go limp. He drops the sword and collapses to his knees in front of the monster. Seeing what he'd done with his own hands, he starts vomiting. This was completely different from the game, and he genuinely thought he was going to die. Suddenly, the system general appears, congratulating him. He had defeated a monster much stronger than him and would receive additional rewards. Additionally, he also defeated an F-class monster. With that, his level rises from 8 to 11. Suddenly, someone calls out to him, and when he looks to the side, it's Krot asking if he's okay. But he quickly notices the dead Sasquatches and the impaled goblin. Krot circles around him, wanting to know if he really wasn't hurt. That's when Calyx asks how the rest of the group is doing. Krot replies that after they killed 2 Sasquatches, the rest fled out of luck. But Calyx knows it wasn't luck, it was Layla's plan. That's when he remembers something and asks where the soldier who was with him is. Krot asks if he means Albu, and our boy says yes. He then points to the side and says he's standing right there. Calyx knew it was impossible for no one to die on the mission, but seeing Albu's body, he apologizes. He blames himself, saying he should have been more careful. Krot stands there observing. Then he says it wasn't Calyx's fault. Besides, Albu had died honorably on the battlefield. But Calyx tells him to stop being ridiculous. Death was just death. There was nothing honorable about it. Krot knows this is the first time the boy has lost his subordinate and understands how he feels. But soon after, more bodies are brought before him. Calyx freezes and asks what happened in the end. Krot says that 3 died and 1 was injured, which was a good outcome given the circumstances. But Calyx can only think that all of this is his fault. He should have forced the knowledge he has about this world without fear of being exposed. Besides, he only survived because of Layla's traps and because Albu stepped in to defend him. He clenches his fists and begins shouting while all the soldiers watch him. He then asks what is done with bodies on the battlefield. Krot explains that if the body isn't in too bad a condition, they can take it back. Calyx simply says to do it, no matter what state they're in. As Krot turns to give the order, he notices everyone crying. The soldiers were moved because, in this world, it wasn't common for a noble to care about their servants. Seeing how he acted, they swore they would protect his life at any cost. Krot noticed everyone's expressions had changed. At least the boy had won a bit of their hearts. Sometime later, Krot approaches our boy. He says that they're ready to leave and are just waiting for the signal. Calyx notices that they're looking at him differently. Seeing their determination, he knew this wasn't the time to feel guilty. He needed to give everyone hope for the future. He then praised everyone's performance in the battle against the Sasquatches. Now they would head to their destination as quickly as possible. However, they wouldn't neglect or abandon anyone who was injured. The men shout that they understand, and then we see what happened an hour ago. Layla was approaching when a Sasquatch lunged at her. Strong as always, she dodges it but hadn't expected them to notice her so quickly. She throws a dagger attached to a rope and leaps to the other side, dodging the Sasquatch's attack and climbing up onto a branch. With that, she blocks the path and jumps back down to the ground. But she turns around and the beast comes at her. It suddenly smashes face first into a trap. With it immobilized, all she had to do was finish it off. But the monster keeps moving and even grabs a tree, pulling it out of the ground. She hadn't expected that. The giant comes in for a crushing hug, but she easily dodges it. Sliding to the side, she starts wrapping the rope around its neck. Before the beast realizes it's already being strangled. Somehow, she had managed to make it work. She didn't think it would be possible for this ape to break through those monster tendons. Besides, the ropes were too thin for it to grab with its hands. Then she notices that even while strangled, it's still knocking over trees. She's a bit shocked and decides she needs to finish this quickly. According to what Calyx said, all she had to do was inject the venom straight into its bloodstream. Once again, the ape comes in for a smash, but she dodges and slips behind it. She pulls out a needle and drives it right into the monster's nape. She had done everything he told her to, but she wasn't sure it would actually work. Now her only option was to pray that it worked. The ape, however, doesn't seem to be calming down and keeps thrashing until the trees shatter. Then she realizes the venom isn't working as well as expected. Or rather, is working because the ape's eyes roll back and it crashes face first to the ground. She's impressed that it actually worked. As much as she didn't want to admit it, that blonde brat knew more about poisons than she did. But it's very strange because he changed so much overnight. She's been watching him up close for over a year now. Yet suddenly, he seems like a completely different person. At least she hopes it's for the better. After all, she never thought she'd have the chance to get revenge again. But maybe now it's possible. Back on the wagons, Calyx glances back. Some soldiers who survived are still exhausted and beaten up. He tells Krot that they're going to stop here, and Krot says he understands. As the soldiers sit around the trees, Calyx approaches and offers them some potions. They hesitate because those are very expensive. But our boy just tosses the bottles to them and tells them to drink up already. That's when someone comes up behind him and asks what he's doing. Calyx already knew someone would complain about this. Krot tells him that even a low-rank potion is extremely expensive. These ones, Russell had prepared specifically for him. After all, 10 bottles like these cost half the reserves of their house. Angrily, Calyx asks if he's telling him to let everyone suffer while these potions just sit there. Krot looks uncomfortable and says that's not exactly what he meant. Everyone watches, and our boy tells them not to worry. When the expedition is over, they'll have enough money to buy as many potions as they want. At that moment, both of them are surprised again. The soldiers bow, thanking the Lord for his generosity. The clueless Calyx is at a loss for words. Meanwhile, Krot notices that now those soldiers have truly decided to give their lives for him. Our boy tells him to wipe that dumb smile off his face and get ready to move out. As soon as he gets on the wagon, the system screen pops up, showing that the support percentage had increased to 18%. tent. He smiles and tells them to move forward. The wagons continue advancing through the forest. Sometime later, someone shouts for them to stop. Krat asks what's wrong and Calyx says they've arrived at the destination. Krat looks confused because he doesn't see any secret vault. Not to mention there's no one guarding the area. What kind of place is this? Calyx asks if Layla has sent a message, and Krat says no. With that, they just decide to set up camp there for now. Until further orders, they would stay put. A while later, inside a tent, Calyx points to a region on the map and says that the Hoshiran family vault is right there. Krat asks if he's not way off, and our boy says no. At that moment, Krat yells in his face, saying that based on the map, it would take at least a week to get there. The soldiers were already getting exhausted after being away from home for so long, and if they told them they had to march for another week, half would probably give up. Thomas also says that staying in one place for too long is dangerous because they'd be found soon. Calyx lazily tells them to listen before they start complaining. He just pointed to the vault's location. He never said they were going there. Krat comes to ask if the objective of the expedition isn't to steal the vault. Calyx walks to a corner of the tent and says they'll access it from there. He starts stomping on the ground, searching for something until he steps on a lever. Suddenly, the ground begins to rise and a stone appears in front of him. The men look completely confused as he starts fiddling with some kind of puzzle. Suddenly, the stone sinks back into the ground, revealing an entrance. As soon as the blonde boy steps forward to follow the path, the men grab him, saying it could be a dangerous trap. Our boy says he highly doubts that. Krat then admits he's confused and wants to know how Calyx has information about this place. Calyx says that what he knows comes from a reliable source. Considering he's been somewhat incompetent so far, he knows it's hard for them to believe him. But soon, they'll see for themselves. Krat looks a bit embarrassed and Thomas steps in, saying he believes in their leader. A leader who valued even the weakest of his soldiers was someone he could place his trust in. The other soldiers alongside them also say they believe in him. If they follow this path and die anyway, it would be an honor. Krat gets emotional and our boy tells them to stop trusting him because he's still weak and can't even use mana properly. They were idiots to trust their lives to someone like him. Thomas smiles, and let me tell you, the smiles in this story are dark. I always feel like these guys have some sinister intention. Thomas then says that strength isn't always physical. Our boy tells Krat to stop crying and turns to everyone, saying it's time to go. With that, the army begins descending the stairs. Meanwhile, Calyx looks out from the tent, hoping everything went well with Layla. Back with everyone's favorite assassin, Layla is collecting monkey blood. She wipes her face, saying she has enough. Standing in front of the cave, she says it's time for some fun. She starts striking two pieces of wood together to start a fire. In the next scene, she's jumping from branch to branch, and from afar, you can see the fire she caused. With that, all the Sasquatches in the area should be drawn to it. The problem, however, was something else. Some hooded guys whose insignias looked eerily familiar were passing through the area and saw some bodies on the ground. Layla already knew these cockroaches would show up. She puts her hand on her dagger, saying she's going to finish this. She'd show them what happens when you turn your back on someone with the position of an executioner. One of the men on the ground starts writing on a paper, saying they're in an emergency. They have found a Sasquatch's body, and there was no one wounded nearby. That meant someone capable of fighting a creature like that was in the area. And in this entire region, there was only one family capable of something like that. He needed to inform the Viscount immediately. Layla is quietly observing from a distance. She sees how they're sealing the letters and knows they're scouts. At that, she analyzes the direction of the wind. She takes some of the blood in her pocket and smears it on the tree next to her. Once again, another guy is sealing a letter, and she's watching from the tree above. The scene shifts to the Sasquatches arriving at the fire. They all want to enter the cave, but suddenly, one of them stops and sniffs the air. All of them begin roaring and change direction. One of the scouts carrying the letter is leaping from branch to branch, thinking he needs to deliver the information as quickly as possible. He stops on a branch to check the path ahead, and takes a dagger straight to the chest. He looks down, sees the blade, and when he turns to look behind him, he's kicked to the ground. Man, he falls like a piece of trash. Layla approaches the body, grabs the letter, and realizes it's important to inform the prince about this. She immediately starts running. Meanwhile, the Sasquatches are wandering through the forest, following the scent of blood. At the same time, the group continues advancing through the tunnel. Calyx knows that this place was built by a wizard who had retired to conduct experiments, so it wouldn't make sense for that person to set up a bunch of traps in their own house. Krat argues that it's for ensuring the person's safety. However, our boy places his hand on the wall and says there are no traces of digging. The stairs, too, were crafted using magic. To have that kind of power, the person would have to be at least an 8th class archmage, which means if this person really wanted to set traps, everyone here would already be dead. Krat doesn't quite know how to respond. Then, following the path, they reach a passage leading into a massive room. Excited, Krat orders Thomas to protect their boy while the rest search for treasure. Calyx says that if they find any intermediate level potions, they should give them to the injured soldiers. He walks over to a chair and sits down calmly. At that moment, Thomas asks how Viscount Hoshiran discovered such a ruin. Our boy says maybe it was luck or someone shared the information, but he isn't sure. Thomas then remarks that it's strange they even had a magical crystal ball. Suddenly, Calyx's expression changes and he wonders if this is what he thinks it is. Even though the magical protections had weakened, it wasn't something the Viscount could break easily. He then asks who the Viscount's lord is, and Thomas replies that it's Marcus Antonio. Calyx realizes he'll have to prepare for the worst. At that moment, Krat shows up with the intermediate potions Calyx mentioned. Calyx immediately tells him to hand them out to the soldiers, and Krat does so. Though he can't help but think it's far too expensive to waste like this. But Calyx knows that, at a time like this, it's more important to have soldiers than to keep potions stored away. They then show him some magical crystals, additional potions, materials, and other items. None of it was useless, but there wasn't anything incredibly valuable either. However, Calyx knows that if the system said, this is a treasure ruin, there's still something hidden here. Suddenly, he senses something coming from the corner of the room. Out of nowhere, Krat puts his hand in front of him and asks what's wrong. Krat says they've already completed their investigation and there's nothing lurking in the shadows, so he should stop trying to act alone. But Calyx walks forward anyway, saying he doesn't care because Krat wouldn't understand. He starts running his hand along the wall, trying to remember where the secret door was located. That's when he finds a small hole for his thumb and everything begins to shift. Here comes the boy's treasure. Looks like those 10 years of playing games really paid off. Inside, there's a giant crystal ball surrounded by smaller crystal spheres. doors. Additionally, it's like a monitoring room that could oversee their entire approach. Krat, however, points out that there's something very strange about this place. They had investigated all the ruins, yet he doesn't recall seeing a room like this. Calyx explains that this is what's called a false ruin. In the past, it was common to make two entrances. One of them was easy to find but contained nothing valuable, so most people would give up. Krat deduces that the false ruin must be the Hoshiran family's secret vault, and Calyx says that since everything is connected, they can reach it from here. He places his hand on the sphere, trying to recall which function needs to be activated. After fiddling with it for a bit, they hear a sound nearby. When Krat runs over, he sees a door opening, and Calyx tells him this leads to the false ruin, but he says there's more. Looking further at the spheres, he points out that in the false ruin, there's an entrance. That entrance leads to the silver mines that have been making the Hoshiran family so much money. Krat says that now it's clear how the royal family never noticed this. Calyx warns that since they don't see anyone here, it likely means the area is only used at specific times, and to ensure rumors don't spread, the workers are probably killed soon after. Krat is furious, but Calyx reassures him, saying it's fine. All they need to do is disable the crystal ball the Hoshirans use as a key. It's like modifying security codes and access connections. After taking everything they need, he'll obviously leave a present for those guys. He then tells Krat to take the men and start collecting all the crates because it's time to leave. But Krat looks sad again about leaving the prince's side. For heaven's sake, bring back my waifu already. Calyx says he can handle it alone, and Krat reluctantly agrees, saying he'll return soon. With that, he leaves and Calyx celebrates finally having a moment to himself. And wouldn't you know it, our boy finds yet another secret passage. Inside, he discovers an item he's very familiar with from the game, though it looks very different in person. It's the bracelet of the Grand Alchemy Priest. The translation here is garbage, isn't it? And I'm translating the garbage translation, so this is peculiar. Its effect is that when you're on the brink of death, it activates a protective barrier that lasts for 2 hours. But if you take another very strong hit while the barrier is active, obviously, it breaks. The item had a cooldown period of 1 week, and after 3 activations, it would stop working. However, it was perfect for him, since at this moment he has no combat abilities. He slips it onto his wrist, thinking that now it's as if he has 3 extra lives. But as he's about to leave, he notices one more detail. Inside the place where he picked up the item, there was something written. He tries to read it but only understands part of it, something about a Hecatoria or something like that. The problem is that the rest of the message is indecipherable to him. He remembers that once in the game he heard about this name, Hecatoria. In the legends, she's the goddess who taught humans how to use magic, but he's certain this didn't exist in the game. Could this be something that only belongs to this world? As he touches it with his finger, electricity begins to surge, and he feels a tremor. Suddenly, it seems like only his consciousness exists, and he asks where he is and why he can't see anything. Looking down, there's a giant eye surrounded by glowing blue shapes. He wonders if this is the domain of the divines he heard about, the so-called gods that watch over people in this world. Suddenly, he begins to writhe in pain as a voice echoes in his head. It was as if the words were being forced directly into his brain. A red-haired woman's voice says that this is wrong and inhuman, but one of the energy sources replies that there were no humans there. It warns Hecatoria that the matter had already been settled by vote. She should not think of breaking the pact. The woman protests, saying it's violence and she won't agree to it. Another voice says that if she wants so badly to be human, her wish would be granted. Suddenly, she appears kneeling atop the giant eye. Calyx hears a terrifying sound he can't comprehend. While Hecatoria is screaming in the middle of it all, he covers his ears because he can't bear to listen any longer. The voices declare that Hecatoria has now fallen to the rank of a demigod. It would no longer be appropriate to call her by her old name. From now on, she would become an object of hatred, driven into miserable madness by the very insects she adored. They were eager to see the expression on her face at that moment. Suddenly, Calyx finds himself back in the room. I'm confused, he's confused, you're confused. This must be author's intent. Out of nowhere, the system window pops up and Calyx is shocked. He had obtained a fragment of Hecatoria's first authority. It appears to be a skill that deals area of effect damage to all nearby enemies. The damage scales with his level and is impossible to dodge. However, the more enemies there are, the less damage it deals overall. Calyx knows that abilities normally range from rank F to rank S, but there are exceptions when it comes to so-called unique abilities. And beyond that, there are authority abilities which are even more distinct. It's a power that only X-class individuals or those known as demigods can use. In fact, developing an authority is the only way to reach the X-class. Another system window appears, stating that he has absorbed a fragment of authority. This raises the rank of his soul. Calyx is now certain that the one who sent him to this world was the goddess named Hecatoria. He knows that only authority level abilities can harm a god. Perhaps she's hoping that somehow he'll avenge her. The lunatic starts laughing with his hand over his face, wondering if this is really going to be the final objective of this game. Obviously, he feels like he's being manipulated, but he's going to end this whether he wants to or not. At that moment, Krat returns and asks if he's done. Calyx tells him not to be surprised, and Krat looks confused. In the next scene, everything is chaotic and lively. There was so much treasure in that room that they needed more time to collect it all. Just the chests filled with coins totaled over 30,000. Our boy gets excited. It's much more than he expected. And Krat says that, in addition, there are several crates with silver bars worth about 100,000 gold coins. The only problem is that transporting so much loot with just this expedition wouldn't be easy. Calyx thinks he never imagined the biggest problem would be having too much treasure to carry. But to him, it doesn't matter how much there is, it won't be a problem. Because when he killed the goblin, he gained the inventory ability. He's feeling all confident, grinning to himself, while Krat wonders about his excitement. Calyx simply tells him to bring the crates closer. He'll handle the rest. Krat asks if everything in front of him is accounted for, and the man confirms it. Calyx then tells him to prepare everyone for the return journey. Krat agrees, though he has no idea what the boy is planning. But Calyx knows that in this world, the concept of players and abilities doesn't exist. It would take too long to explain what an inventory is. So instead of explaining, he'll just make it work. At that moment, Krat says everyone's outside, but asks what they're going to do with the crates. Calyx shows the bracelet and says he obtained it there. It has a subspace magic ability. It's an extremely rare artifact with enough room to store all the crates. Krat's eyes go wide, and he asks where Calyx got something like that. Our boy simply tells him to keep quiet and keep it a secret. He says that truly understanding something that valuable would be dangerous if others found out. He then says he's heading out, and Krat agrees while still stunned. Calyx thanks him as he leaves. Now he needed to focus on the objective. Thinking of the inventory, the system window pops up. He wonders if it's going to be as simple as a game. He touches one of the crates, and immediately it appears in the inventory as silver bars. It looks as easy as he imagined, and he begins loading his inventory. Man, the kid's like Minecraft, stacking everything in piles of 99. With all the treasure collected, it was time to return. He climbs the stairs, and the men greet him, saying that everyone is ready for the journey back. But Calix is looking around. He wants to know if Layla still hasn't returned. Krot says no and questions whether maybe she betrayed them and fled. That's why he never trusted her from the beginning. Calix tells him to wake up to reality. It wasn't a coincidence that the Sasquatches fled at that exact moment during the fight. After explaining what happened, everyone looks shocked. Krot says that attacking the Sasquatch's nest alone was a suicide mission. Even though he didn't like the girl, he didn't want her to die like that. Calix says he would have suggested sending soldiers with her. But since no one trusted her, she had to go alone on that venture. Krot realizes that not only was he wrong, but it was because of her that they survived. Our boy says that if she hasn't returned, it's because something must have happened. Thanks to her, they avoided countless sacrifices. Now it was time to help her. Everyone stands at attention. Krot says he'll follow the Lord's orders. The other knights say that if she risked her life to save everyone, they needed to help her. Meanwhile, the clueless servant is just thinking that everything in this mission has been trouble. At least now, as a knight, he would complete his duty. Calix orders them to split into a squad to search for her, while the rest will hide in the ruin. He's considering two possibilities for what might have happened to Layla. Either she was pursued by the Sasquatch leader or by the organization she belongs to. At this moment, he still believes it's the Sasquatches, since no other pursuers have shown up yet. Besides, he's certain she's careful enough not to be caught in the act. The problem now is figuring out how to find her. Krot asks what they'll do next, and Calix checks that everyone is ready. The plan for now was to head straight to the Sasquatch base and start avenging those monkeys. Before Krot can protest, Calix places some herbs in his hands and tells him to burn them. It would produce a kind of oil that everyone should coat their weapons with. He warns Krot not to complain about the plan, and Krot just agrees. Calix looks up, telling Layla to hold on. Sometime later, they're spying on the Sasquatch's base. They're sure that only females and children are inside. Calix says they'll kill those inside first, and soon enough, the males will rush into the cave. But the men look uneasy and ask if this is really okay, since he already knows how dangerous the creatures are. Our boy tells them to see for themselves how powerful the poison on their weapons is. With that, they step forward, and the Sasquatches hear something. The entire army begins advancing toward them. As the fight begins, Calix hears others approaching. They run toward the cave, and Calix says it's now their turn. They follow some footprints, and our boy says he's sure Layla wouldn't be defeated by those creatures. That's why it'll follow the largest footprints. Riding on Thomas's back, they start running. Along the way, Thomas asks if Calix likes the woman. He gets it. After all, she's a very attractive woman. Calix tells him to focus on the mission and stop joking around. But Thomas replies that he never imagined she would volunteer for something so dangerous. Calix responds that it's because she realized they needed her too. At this moment, the Sheikhan family is the only place that's good for her. Thinking about the girl's appearance, Calix knows that on Earth, she'd be a celebrity. But Layla doesn't care about that. Maybe it's because she's always lived with the urgency to survive. The first large-scale content of this game is called the Invasion of Jaboru, and the faction living in these mountains played a direct role in that event. Perhaps from the very beginning, Selvio was intentionally planning all of this. Inside the cave, Krot is amazed they won. The men are cheering, saying that, just as the Lord said, it was very easy to kill the apes with the poison. But they remind each other there's no time to rest, and they quickly set off running again. Krot is impressed, saying that when it comes to poison, he truly respects Calix. At the very least, he hopes Layla is safe. But then they spot someone lying on the ground, blood at their mouth. On their way, Thomas and Calix notice something. Our boy is shocked to see Layla lying on the ground, surrounded by two wolves. Thomas runs ahead and slashes the first wolf, while Calix runs to help her. The problem is that her wound is much deeper than he imagined. He quickly uses a mid-tier potion, and thankfully, it seems to be enough. The only problem is that her recovery will be gradual, and she'll need several more. Thomas returns, saying he drove off the wolves. He helps our boy sit Layla up as Calix gives her more potion. Her skin color starts improving, and they both feel relieved. At that moment, Krot shows up, and our boy says he arrived just in time. Suddenly, the scene jumps forward to a week later at Sheikhan Castle. Our boy, who looks more like a beautiful girl, is there training. For heaven's sake, right? This kid is too weak. He's at level 18, which isn't that bad. He's only 15 years old, and the average for an adult man is around level 20. Nearby, Russell watches and says that at least the boy's stamina is improving a lot. He could say that Calix's physical condition wasn't bad at all. Krot comments that he seems completely different from the day they explored the ruins. Maybe he's taking some kind of secret potion. The hard-headed guy is there all confident, looking like something out of solo leveling. He says that his journey to level up has only just begun. The servant suggests they start sword training right away, but Russell says that Calix's body needs to recover first. Suddenly, Calix announces that he has something to resolve at the magical tower today. Krot didn't know about this, but our boy tells him to get ready because he's coming along for the visit. With that, he begins to leave, but Russell remarks that it seems Calix now trusts Krot a lot. Krot responds that he doesn't know why, but he's certain the boy has exceptional talent. Besides, he genuinely cares about his subordinates and the people of the kingdom. Russell comments that lately it's been hard to understand the boy's actions and way of thinking. Krot says that while he may be talented, he still needs a master to guide him. But Russell counters that the priority right now is for Calix to obtain his official title. He needs to complete the coming-of-age ceremony and advance to Class 4 soon. Still, the fear Russell once had about the future of the territory had disappeared. He never imagined someone suitable would appear this early. The scene shifts to the branch of the magical tower in Sheikhan's territory. Amidst an endless library, someone welcomes them. Our two boys appear, and here comes another dangerous situation. We're all thinking about Layla. Where is that girl who vanished after the rescue? A woman welcomes the beautiful boy and the muscular man, pulling them in and cheerfully telling them to make themselves at home. She seems strangely upbeat for a mage. She then asks if they'd like tea and uses telekinesis to set the cups in front of them. As she touches the teapot, steam begins to rise. Calix is impressed that an isolated place like this has a Class 5 mage. Her name is Rosen Dreamwalker, 32 years old, though she looks 26. She serves the tea and asks why he looks so surprised. Calix says he didn't expect to meet someone as incredible as her in such a rural area. Strangely, Crot is already wondering if this woman is Calix's type. Calix then says that if she can heat tea in an instant, she's at least a class 5 mage. He's certain that it's impossible for a woman in her 20s to achieve something like that without immense talent. The cheeky guy knows she's 32 but is just buttering her up, right? She's all flustered. The fool fell for the trap. Crot is about to comment that she's not in her 20s, but our boy squeezes his arm. The trick works, and she's all happy but admits she's already over 30. Our boy is the master of charm and asks if she has any secrets for staying so youthful. While she says all she does is wash her face with water, Crot is just sitting there listening to the two of them. Some time passes. Finally, Rosen asks what brings the two of them to her tower. They were finally getting to the point. Calix says he's there to buy explosion scrolls. She's impressed, saying he must be a very unique client. She tells him that 30 of those scrolls would cost 600 gold, but because he's such a cute boy, she'll only charge him 500. Our boy is thrilled to see that using his looks can get him a discount. He asks if that won't get her into trouble. Rosen reassures him, saying she has the authority to adjust prices. Calix then says he actually has one more request. It's a bit hard to say, but he wants to borrow from the reserve fund. That doesn't make her very happy. She asks how much he's thinking of borrowing. When he says 60,000, the woman spits out her tea. Of course, she says there's no way she can lend that much money. But our boy reveals that he'll leave gold coins and silver bars as collateral, and until he pays it back, she can also charge interest. At the mention of interest, Rosen, who clearly has a bit of a loan shark vibe, starts looking excited. Calix explains that it'll only be a short-term loan, but he really needs it. That's because it would be madness for Gerard to find out he's using the very coins Calix stole from him. Calix knows this is the only place he can get 60,000 gold. Rosen lowers her head, apologizes, and says that unfortunately, it's just too much. Calix didn't expect that. It seems his favorability wasn't high enough, or maybe he was just too hasty. She adds that she's sure the supervisor would reject it, but then she suggests an alternative. Covering her mouth with her hand, she says the people at central headquarters don't keep much of an eye on her area. Maybe it's possible to do it, but it would have to remain a secret between the three of them. If he pays it back within 6 months, there won't be any problems. But as soon as the 6 months passed, she would sell all the gold and silver to recover the money. Our boy is thrilled. That was exactly his plan. Mages are greedy because they need resources to conduct their research, and she was definitely thinking he wouldn't have the money to pay it back, so she'd pocket all the interest. He bows deeply and thanks her, saying he'd be very relieved if she could do this. Meanwhile, he's thinking that now he's resolved the debt with Gerard. Speaking of the fool, he's sitting in front of a subordinate demanding the map. He slams it on the table, furious because it seems that one of the patrols near the vault has disappeared. He begins to wonder if he's in any danger. That's when he realizes that if someone had a direct path to the vault, it would take less than a day. The guy is about to explode with rage. Immediately, he orders everyone to prepare to head to the lands of Golda. The problem is that the direct path was very different. Layla's former team runs headfirst into a golem. With Gerard right behind them, they have no choice but to attack. The golem swings its massive hand, and they realize they won't have time to dodge. The fools get sent flying. The weaker guys nearby already know that if they try to advance, they'll die too. They didn't even need to get close. They got flattened on the spot. Another man, his hair turning white with fear, shouts for caution. But he gets crushed too. Man, these guys are getting destroyed. Two more idiots panic, and another golem finishes them off. Gerard stands there, silent, while the trainer of those men wonders why a golem has appeared. A creature like that doesn't form naturally, which means there's at least a class 5 mage nearby. He turns to Gerard and suggests they retreat, but Gerard shouts at him, demanding to know why he's saying that. No matter what happens, they must press forward. The path had to be cleared within 24 hours because they had tributes to pay to the Marquis. Even if everyone died in that place, they were to keep moving forward. Back at the tower, Rosen casually asks if they've received a little gift. She wonders if it's something romantic, like a lover or an affair. Our boy says no, and she replies that in that case, she'd like to receive a gift from him. Just then, Layla bursts through the door, asking if there's really an old hag trying to seduce her lord. Calix enters and announces that all the luggage has already been stored in the tower. Meanwhile, Layla is just glaring at Rosen. Our boy thanks her for the good work and hands her something. He then asks both of them to wait outside. As they leave, Layla asks why the prince was talking to that mage. Crot just whistles, saying he has no idea why. Inside, Rosen is all happy and blushing, saying it's wonderful. Our boy gave her a necklace of golden pearls, and she asked if he's really going to give her something like that. He says it's a token of gratitude for the funds she's preparing for them. This was, of course, the artifact the system had shown him. He tells her not to forget to keep all of this a secret. If they tried to do this the proper way, the paperwork would never be approved. But Calix knows she's angling for the interest she'd earn on the loan for the magical tower. Rosen reassures him, saying she'll keep that in mind and that he can count on her. She then asks why he wants so many explosion scrolls. Was he preparing for a war? Calix is impressed by her skill in extracting information. Seriously though, it's a normal question. You bought 30 scrolls that blow everything up. He stands up and says he's not planning anything like that. Those scrolls would only be used for mining. She finds it odd that he used something so expensive just to dig holes. She asks if he's found a gold mine. Calix is tired of how much information this woman is trying to pull from him. He waves goodbye, saying they'll continue the conversation next time. She looks surprised but smiles, saying she's looking forward to it. Outside, he finally has 60,000 gold in his inventory. With that, all the massive debts of the territory could be paid. He's just anxious to see Gerard's reaction when he finds out his treasures were stolen. While he knows he means nothing to Selvio, it's obvious he won't let the man who ordered his assassination get away with it. They would pay for what they did. Even if they had no idea this had already begun, the revenge wasn't over yet. Back at the golem, the men have wrapped chains around it, trying to pull the creature down. They anchored it to the ground, pulling in all directions until they finally expose its core. One of the men stabs it with a knife, yelling for it to die, and strikes the center of its chest. The core flares up, releasing an explosion as the stones fly in every direction. Man, the squad is in rough shape. Everyone is dead on the ground, swords scattered, bodies collapse. One of the men says they managed to kill the golem, but it costs 60% of their squad. Gerard, however, tells him to stop complaining and to just open the gates already. They reach the door of the hideout and a man brings the crystal ball forward. But when he places it on the door, it displays a message. User invalid. An unauthorized access is detected and the security measures begin to activate. A warning sounds, telling them to step away from the area within 180 seconds. The man insists and tries to place the crystal ball once more. But of course, the error is the same and Gerard kicks the door in frustration, unable to understand what's happening. He has no idea why it isn't working. The man next to him warns that it's better for them to back away because they have no clue what these security measures are. With that, they start running while the door remains intact. They enter stage 1 of the interception program. The security measure was to summon numerous creatures that would attack anyone within a defined range. Back in the carriage, our boy asks Layla where she heard that. She replies that she heard it while he was flirting with that mage. Our boy notices she seems a little angry and says he wouldn't do something like that. It was all business. However, he wanted to ask her something. What would happen if he betrayed Selvio? She looks confused and asks why he's even thinking about betraying the Viscount. Our boy says he just wants to know what kind of person Selvio is. The type to let his subordinates' mistakes slide? She explains that no, he's an extremely perfectionist man. A person who would never tolerate failure in any form. Our boy then wants to know what would happen to Gerard if the Viscount found out. Layla says she has no idea, but Gerard is also not someone who would accept being killed so easily. He would probably try to survive at any cost. It's obvious he wouldn't hesitate to betray the Viscount if necessary. Our boy thinks to himself that it's obvious Gerard wouldn't let himself be killed so easily. Meanwhile, Layla is watching him, realizing that the boy is planning something on his own again. Looking at his cyan-colored eyes, she doesn't know what this strange feeling is. And our boy is deep in thought, feeling like he's missing something. Back in the lands of Golda, the men have finally exterminated the monsters. The problem is that the Viscount's forces have also been almost completely wiped out. Gerard orders them to bring reinforcements and to open that door. There was no way to enter normally, so they had to use explosion scrolls. They blow up the entire door, and the entrance is now open. But the man already had a bad feeling about this. Inside, they realize the treasures are not there. Desperate, he orders the men to quickly find the silver. Everyone runs around searching. Of course, they won't find anything. One of them eventually finds a scroll on the ground. He opens it, wondering what it is. It's an explosive. Boom! Everyone's sent to the afterlife. When Gerard gets up, he has no idea what just happened. Most of the men who ran off to look for the treasure are now buried under rubble. At that moment, Gerard already knows. With what just happened, they will be executed by Viscount Selvio. It's time to activate an emergency plan. He approaches one of the men and tells him he's always been grateful for his service. Out of nowhere, another man comes from behind and finishes him off. Gerard tells the man not to blame himself because he did everything right. It's just that the secret couldn't leave that place. With that, another one is dead. The friend of the fallen man says that someone named Cape definitely won't stay quiet about this. They probably sense something abnormal in the region and will soon figure everything out. Gerard replies that it doesn't matter. All they can do now is follow the emergency plan. The scene shifts to Viscount Selvio's villa. Gerard is there and the old man says nothing. He just stands there until finally he says he heard the story. Immediately, Gerard throws himself to the ground, banging his head and begs for forgiveness. Selvio says he doesn't care about apologies since results are the only thing that matters. He wants to know where the silver he had saved for the greater cause has gone. Gerard says it must be the work of some tomb raiders. He explains that somehow they must have dug their way in within a day. The man says that doesn't make sense since the security system would have been activated. Not to mention it would take a long time to dig that deep. Gerard lies, saying that most of the silver coins are still there. There's no way a handful of tomb raiders could have stolen everything in such a short span of time. Besides, they're already keeping an eye on all the merchants in the region to see where the precious metals will end up. Once that happens, they'll ambush them. Silver coins aren't something you can take far away very easily. Eventually, whoever stole them will return to sell them. Selvio says he understands and warns that it's best to capture those people as soon as they return. Gerard assures him there's nothing to worry about. It will be done. Selvio goes to a drawer and says they need to apply pressure until these thieves return every last coin. However, something had to happen. Of course, Gerard had received his punishment. The poor man begs to be spared, but the whip comes down on his back. Selvio curses him as a slave bastard and asks if he's really mocking him. Gerard is just there, thinking that somehow he has to endure this hell. Selvio continues whipping him, shouting that the biggest problem is that he lost half of the shadow forces. Something they had been training for so long became useless because of him. After a great deal of affection on Gerard's back, Selvio pauses for a moment. He warns that his complaints are nothing. But if they jeopardize the greater cause, that's a whole different story. He warns that from now on, Gerard no longer has any authority over the shadow forces, and he can only act after receiving permission from him. Gerard, of course, simply replies that he understands. The man then says that they urgently need tribute money now. He orders Gerard to inform the Shikan territory that they will begin the process of confiscating their assets. Even if they don't have much of value, would be enough to help with the tributes. If it's not possible to take anything from Shikan, then Gerard himself would have to sell what he owns to pay the bills. Gerard just says he understands and tells him not to worry. Meanwhile, he's thinking to himself that there's no way he's losing everything he worked so hard to get. Selvio sits back in his chair and reminds him that he hasn't been forgiven. He'll have to find that silver. And if he doesn't, he already knows what will happen. Sweating profusely, Gerard simply replies that he understands and bows deeply. Outside, Gerard's friend asks if he's okay. He hands him a potion and tells him to recover quickly. Gerard drinks it and the man tosses him a cloak, saying they need to return to the base soon. However, Gerard wants to know where this Jacoby is. The man responds that Jacoby drank too much, and after the fight, he hasn't been able to do anything. But recently, they added a desert boy who looks like Prince Calix. Gerard scoffs, saying he doesn't like desert folks because of their sunburned skin. However, he wants to know how the rest of the preparations are going. The friend replies that everything will be ready in 3 days. The problem is whether they'll be able to escape easily. The man reassures him, saying not to worry. Half of the squad is dead or injured, and the remaining ones are just low-level thugs, so this was the perfect opportunity. Maybe all these events were a blessing in disguise. After all, the more money they had to build a new life, the better it would be to escape. However, Gerard doesn't look convinced. He believes that the boy from the Shikan family has already won the succession battle easily, so it probably won't be that simple. simple. A few days pass. Krot enters the room and calls for the two of them. He announces that Gerard and Mythos have come to visit. It's probably because of the debts. Russell says it's exactly as the prince had predicted. He tells Krot to accompany the prince to meet with the men. Russell wasn't going to get involved in this anymore because he believed the boy was capable of leading the territory. Krot says he understands. Meanwhile, Gerard, ever the lunatic, looks flushed, saying the boy's physique is improving day by day. But our boy simply replies that he doesn't greet unnecessary people, and that Gerard's arrogant attitude was already testing his patience, so it was better to get straight to the point. Gerard says that if Calix is so eager, he'll be direct too. He opens his arms and announces that the official confiscation would begin. He had determined that the Shikan territory wouldn't be able to pay the 60,000 gold, so they would take everything there as collateral for that amount. Our boy asks what Gerard will do if he refuses. With a finger to his nose, Gerard replies that he'll call for a senior official to ensure Calix doesn't escape. And obviously, a forced audit of the territory would happen. Krot insults Gerard, but the man replies that this isn't a time for violence. It's just that he needs to be a bit more assertive in recovering his funds, as much as he also thinks this is the worst case scenario. Our boy says that if Gerard really thinks it's that bad, he should delay the payment even further. Gerard replies that if Calix were a little more sincere, maybe that could happen. At that moment, Krot realizes the man is subtly asking for a bribe, but Calix feels that paying off the debt now would just leave him at a loss. However, to avoid complicating things for now, he decides to stick to the usual script. He announces that he has managed to gather most of the money, so there's no need for him to be sincere at all. Gerard suddenly stands up and demands to know how he gathered 60,000. Our boy asks why he looks so angry and surprised. Was this a good thing? He places the official notes on the table and says all the values are legitimate. Gerard knows that those notes are indeed government issued. But how the hell did this kid manage to gather 60,000 in such a short time? That's when Gerard has the idea to take this money and flee with it. It would be much better than escaping with gold and silver, so maybe this was the perfect chance to go to another country. Calix places a silver bar on the table and asks if Gerard wants to verify it. He explains that he has 32 pieces of these in 420 crates. At that moment, Gerard recognizes those as the very silver bars he had hidden from the Viscount. Now everything starts to make sense. The Viscount thought Gerard was only hoarding a few silver coins and some copper, but Gerard had been secretly using the hidden mines to amass far more resources and stash them away. Now that Calix knows about it, it's hard for Gerard to go against him because he'd be reported to the Viscount. If Selvio discovered this, Gerard would obviously be executed. Calix then tells Gerard they don't need to pretend anymore about what's happening here, and he asks Gerard what he thinks his fate will be. Since Calix is a kind boy, he'll give him two choices. Either he confesses that he was stealing for Selvio and faces punishment, or he betrays the Viscount and flees this place. Gerard is just seething with frustration, while the boy knows that Gerard is completely cornered. To give him a sliver of hope and help the man out, he decides to take action. Calix tells Gerard that he will help him survive if he chooses to flee. This was a very rare opportunity, so he wants to hear Gerard's answer. Krot seems a bit confused about the prince's plan. Gerard replies that just helping him escape the territory isn't enough. Our boy says he can provide solid support to ensure no one touches him. Gerard asks if the prince is trying to make him serve him. Calix responds that Gerard is already hated by the most powerful person in this region, so obviously that wouldn't be a good deal. Gerard then says that if he had someone even more powerful than that man, surely the prince would be the one conceding. Calix replies that Gerard has finally understood and places a sheet of paper in front of him. He says that once Gerard signs it, he'll reveal the plan. The paper states that the Shikan territory has already paid off all its debts to Murta's companies. The lunatic starts laughing, saying that Calix really is terrifying. It seems the boy has been deceiving the entire world this whole time. Gerard says he'll sign because he has no other option. After all, he doesn't want to become an enemy of the blonde boy. Our boy thanks him, while Gerard thinks to himself that eventually, he'll manage to get a like. And do y'all remember that the last chapter ended when Diddy, crazy in the head, was laughing, saying that yeah, he really was amazing and saying that it was fine, he would sign. Calix just laughed while Diddy kept thinking that for now, this boy was too much for him to handle. After signing, he asked what they were going to do, and our boy said they were heading straight to the capital. Next scene, that sucker Gerard. Bye to you, my guy. Krot asks if he knew everything was going to happen like that, and our boy says he had no idea at all. He just knows they're going to need more support. And obviously, right now, the most influential person is the first son of the Majesty, who soon will become king. His Highness is known as Prince Gale. Krot, however, wants to know if this is going to work out. They gave up the shield, which, whether they liked it or not, was protecting this place. To which Calix replies that he doesn't have to worry because their support hasn't diminished. In fact, he believes this was a perfect deal for 60,000 in gold. He might not have realized it yet, but soon he'd understand what he was talking about. Next scene, one of the leaders from the tomb says he stole everything, tells the Viscount there's something urgent to report. He tells him to speak up, and the guy says all the merchants from Murta disappeared. Besides that, it seems the resources they had, the books and all, have already been sold. In memory, another guy opens the door saying that the people from Murta were robbed by the debt collectors and there's a commotion going on. Some instructors were at Golda Fortress and others vanished. And lastly, a big part of them was found dead. The leader of the fools just stays silent, which makes him start trembling. Then someone else enters the room. Look at that crowded little place. He apologizes but says he's going in because things are happening. He then says that in that region of Shikan, a week ago the forces went there along with Gerard. All of them were arrested, but now he went to check the prison and couldn't find the guy. It's already been confirmed that he disappeared. They tried to track where he went, but apparently all of this had already been planned. The old man closes the book and wonders why that guy is fleeing to Shikan territory. He's definitely not dumb enough to think he could escape. Then he laughs and says they really were smarter than them. He calls for the chubby guy and tells him to send someone to Gorda Fortress. Someone who can confirm that the secret is safe. The chubby guy wants to know, right? What's the secret he doesn't even know about? What do they have to confirm? The Viscount says obviously he's talking about the silver, which leaves the guy confused because everyone knows that silver is supposedly buried. The Viscount says that's exactly why it's within the order. He's ordering them to go there and dig to find out if the silver is or isn't there. They were to use any necessary method. Then he sends the squad leader to bring back the guys who went to Shikan territory. Also, if the spy spies they sent had their identities discovered, they'd probably already flood the territory. The guy is confused, right? Are they supposed to go after them and find out? Are they supposed to do what? After all, he didn't say they fled. He says to leave a boat monitoring the Aran Lake region. If no one goes through there in 2 weeks, they'll know the people are still hiding in that territory, and eventually, the chance for him to take revenge will show up. Then he already goes on telling everyone to get ready, because they were going to talk with Marcus Antonio. The scene already shifts to the man's castle. This Antonio guy says that even he, who's so much of a perfectionist, apparently sometimes fails. To which the Viscount replies, it's nothing serious, just a small mistake that will soon disappear. But another guy seems not to believe it, saying that apparently times are rough, lots of things are going wrong. The Viscount comments that this is a great opportunity to kill that Shikan guy. If someone like him were to ally with the king, the balance of the region would be completely destroyed. Antonio replies that even if they regret it, now there's no going back. But at the very least, they should make sure to find out who was the bastard that stole the money, and why that kid from that Shikan guy helped him escape. Maybe they should fabricate a justification and declare war on him. The Viscount hesitates and asks the Marquis what he thinks about diplomatic pressure. He tells him to explain, and he says that he took a look, and it seems that the Shikan family hasn't placed new representatives in the Council of Nobles. Servius was one of the people who worked for them, and they could use this guy before he loses the position. The Marquis tells him to explain the details while thinking that avoiding war is always good. However, man, our boy Calix already knows very well and comments that soon they'll want to put diplomatic pressure on them. At the very least, they must already know they were betrayed by Gerard. Besides, obviously, it was our boy who helped him escape. Krat says he understands that war is bad for everyone, but how would they put diplomatic pressure on this place? Calix explains that this is very normal. The lords don't leave their castles unless it's a war where if they lose everything. Normally, they stay at a distance in the political game trying to increase influence. Krat responds that that's why apparently the so-called Council of Nobles exists and asks if they shouldn't send a representative. Wow, the boy says they obviously need to send one and asks who theirs is. Krat says it's Ursel and immediately realizes that Guy is one of the people closest to Stella. Right away, he already gets that this is going to be a huge problem. What he doesn't understand is why Calix is so calm. Oh, the rascal likes that 5th dimension chess and says that in a battle it's always good to leave some intentional openings. That way, not only will you know where your enemy will aim, but he'll also think you're weak. Meanwhile, in the royal capital of Eusenia, a gigantic city with over 250,000 inhabitants, the heart of the empire and where King Clivio Karkau lives. On his throne, Clivio asks what the topic of the day is. I don't know if it's just my impression or if I'm crazy, but doesn't it seem like all the villains are kind of from the same family? Like that guy there, the Viscount, seems like he could be a brother of this younger one here. The king obviously wants to talk about the succession of the Shikan region. In the same sentence, he says it's very sad that the guy died and already asks, right, who's going to inherit. At that, someone stands up and tells him not to worry, that the representative of the Shikan region named Ursel was there. The king says that's fine and asks him to explain the situation. Ursel says that currently that place is facing a big mess. All the people there were anxious and worried. That's because Calix Shikan used military power to take control of the place. He falsely accused Countess Stella of murder and arrested her. On top of that, he sealed the mana of his own half-brother. The king has a face like he couldn't care less about that, but says that's kind of unusual and asked him to explain himself. As far as he had heard, the boy isn't some madman. Ursu says he's someone who has already tried to take his own life a few times, so there are some mental challenges going on in the boy's life. Hayes is just thinking that this guy must believe he hasn't gone through more than 30 years of court sessions to notice when someone is lying or making things up. It seems like he fought alongside Calix's father for a while and just thinks that the chubby son was supposed to take over. If Calix took it by force, he already likes the kid. That's what he says, that if he took it by force with military power, someone in that territory supports him. There's no way to take over a territory with no help at all. So is Ursula then saying that maybe all the knights of Shikan territory are crazy following the command of a madman? Now the guy's already trembling, right man? The king is the real deal and didn't even need anything, just solved it by himself. So that's that, right? However, someone else calls out to his majesty and says that falsely accusing someone of murder in addition to sealing the mana of your own half-brother is clearly a serious abuse of power. The king goes to say something and the fat guy already stands up, saying they have to summon Calix to come to the capital. The House of Lords would be responsible for evaluating the physical and mental condition he's in. The king knows that he couldn't really trust the House of Lords, but says that fine, for now he agrees to summon him to the capital. But the investigation would be conducted by the palace administration. However, so they don't get upset, the House of Lords could send someone to accompany the process. The sucker just accepts it, right man? What else can he do? It's the king's word. Already outside, he goes to talk with the guy on the horse and explains that they have a big problem. For some reason, he has no idea the king was protecting that kid Calix. Maybe it was fear that they would gain more influence in the Shikan region. Ah, look at the bastard hiding over there, Fifi, saying it's all good, that this isn't a big problem. Ursel wants to know, right, why it's not a problem. And at that, the Viscount tells Ursel to become the king's son-in-law. In other words, he's ordering him to give up his daughter, and Ursel immediately understands, asking if he's really suggesting giving his child to a dying old man. But the Viscount says he has a slightly longer-term plan. He's not referring to the current king. Maybe in 10 years or 5 years, who knows? Right away, Ursel gets it and says that if that's the case, maybe it's worth it. Haha, because he traded off his daughter like that, man, in 3 words. A few days later in Shikan territory, a royal decree had arrived. Our boy tells them to read it, but Krat is standing there a bit hesitant. Calix just says he already knows what it is, so he should just speak up. And his friend says that the royal palace administration was summoning him there to explain the accusations he was receiving. Lauren wants to know which ones, and the guy says it seems that when you try to take your own life, you damage your soul, and they need to check if the soul is intact. Calix laughs, asking if apparently they're accusing him of going crazy, but he says it's fine, they don't even need to answer that nonsense. Just tell Russell to come up with an excuse and goodbye. Obviously, everyone is shocked, right man? It's an order from the king, and is he planning on defying his highness? Damn, this boy is bold and asks why he have to run out of his house in a panic just because the king summoned him. Besides that, they're trying to prove he's crazy. I'm not sure, but this smells like Viscount Serve and the people trying to set him up. If they couldn't prove anything, they'd probably be killed on the way. That way, their original goal would finally be achieved. Crot and Thomas say it's madness that they plan to kill a direct descendant like that, but they didn't have to worry. They would risk their lives to make sure it didn't happen. Our boy stretches out in the chair, relaxed, saying that the ones who don't have to worry are them. That's because he's not going anywhere. Besides, they had already sent someone to the capital to fight in their place. The guys ask if he's really talking about Gerard. 2 weeks later, back in the capital, someone slams the table calling for the king, asking what action they're going to take to resolve this Shikin issue. They receive a message, and they weren't coming to the capital. He's definitely planning something unscrupulous. The king asks what this supposed big plan of the boy is. Antonio replies that the boy destroyed the mana of the true hair, and now that retribution was about to fall on him, he was afraid. This was a very serious problem. The king says he agrees and wants to know then what they're going to do. Gamut. The guys nearby are seeing that the poor guy is getting screwed going against the king. Antonio then says not to worry. He personally would go visit that place and investigate the matter. Apparently the king just thanks him, saying that he really is a very proactive person. Then the little butler beside him says it's time to go to the next topic. However, when he looks at the agenda, he seems shocked by the information. It was about the marriage of the 5th prince. That one was scared and surprised by the excitement. Must have been trying to use his daughter too. Didn't work out. Huh, bastard. The king comments that he heard the Marquis's daughter is intelligent and beautiful. Maybe it'd be a good idea for her to join with the 5th prince. Obviously, the chubby guy already gets all excited, saying this would be the greatest honor for his family. But then Altumor stands up angrily, telling his majesty to understand that usually the prince has to choose from the girls that are already in the waiting line. Man, apparently there's some sort of royal lineup and he has to interact with the noble girls first. Antonio was all excited. I'm still not understanding the competition going on between this nobility crowd, but I know that offering up the daughters seems to be the top priority. And then the king asks Altumor if he's saying that the Marquis's daughter, by any chance, is inferior. The guy tries to argue about traditions and such, but already gets scolded by the king, right man? Saying it's best not to question his authority in this place. Ah, hold up now, right? The guy got scared, but now I'm starting to get it. It seems the royal folks were supporting the first prince, who's that dude with the black hair, all swag out, golden shoulder pads. But from what the king said, he's wanting to make the other prince, right? The 5th one, the hair. Only problem is, since the royal supporters are backing the first one, if the king puts the 5th on the throne, they're screwed, right? You see it, right? He's dropping the little piece there of the king. It's like they've been abandoned by the king. But just at that moment, the door opens and the first prince walks in. In your first appearance, you look tougher. Now you're all skinny. He comes in saying there's something he needs to inform the king about. But man, the king just replies that he doesn't recall summoning him. So it'd be best if he disappeared from there immediately. Whoa man, but the kid steps forward and says not until the king hears him. Obviously, the king just asks if his authority is being challenged. The kid plays dumb, saying he's not challenging any order. But of course, the king says that not leaving the room is disobedience and warns that he won't let him interfere with Seal's marriage. The kid then says he has no intention of getting involved in any of that. In fact, he came to deal with a completely different matter. And it was something he believes all the nobles there needed to hear. The king tells him to speak then if it's really that important. Then the first prince pulls out a sheet of paper and says it's about the current government of the Shikin reign. It was a message that came from Viscount Russell Neagle. The king is wondering why. To him, that Shikin business was already settled. Egghead over there in the corner though says it doesn't matter how far the Shikins are, they should have at least sent a messenger to explain why they weren't going to show up. But then they comment that they also need to remember whose mana was sealed. Since it was someone related to Marcus Antonio, it would be unfair. The chubby guy stands up, saying they don't even trust him. But Egghead just says that the person who will benefit from Shikin's fall being the one to go there and judge him is kind of unfair. Antonio asks why they're trying to trust this so-called Viscount Russell. What if he's someone who's already working under Calix, who's suspected of being a criminal? But the other guy already jumps in saying that this Russell was the leader of the Blue Lions, an extremely honorable soldier who upheld the spirit of justice. Besides that, he received the Royal Order of Honor. In a country called the Land of Knights, it would be ridiculous not to trust someone like that. Antonio realizes he's running out of options and won't be the one to investigate Calix. The king tells everyone to calm down and says he's sure Antonio didn't mean that Russell couldn't be trusted. The chubby guy's looking kind of awkward there, not knowing what to do. But then the first prince asks why don't they examine the content of the letter. The king says fine, but he'll read it aloud. The letter came from Russell and said that in that place there really was an assassination attempt, and Prince Granvini, whose plans were uncovered and was going to be executed, sealed his own mana as the price. All the punishments were carried out and delivered by him and Russell himself, the regional representative. In addition, all the knights agree unanimously, and that was their response to the Council of Lords. Suddenly, someone in the back asks to verify the signature. It's that Marquis Souvenir, who says he once served under Russell and knows his handwriting. Seems like that Marquis was one of the kingdom's big shots, and it seems he really admires Russell a lot. He replies that there's no doubt at all that this is Russell's handwriting. Now Antonio realizes he's screwed. How is he supposed to counter what the prince said, what Russell said, and now what the Marquis confirmed? Not to mention that damn first prince showed up the perfect time and has drawn a lot of attention. A new battle for succession is clearly about to start. The cursed actor doesn't give up, man. He says that even with all this confirmed, they still need to know who actually tried to assassinate Granvini. They couldn't just trust what a low-level assassin said. They'd need physical evidence. The bald guy, however, says they can't leave that place without someone in charge. Antonio agrees and says that Calix, who's only 15, from what he heard the boy doesn't even have the skill to become a knight. To him, someone who owns a territory should at the very least be a sword master. Egghead laughs, asking if he really thinks the boy was going to be a sword master at 15. As far as he knows, Antonio himself only reached that rank at 50. Ah, it was all part of Dirty Antonio's plan, who says he agrees. But at the very least, the boy should prove he has some potential, reaching the level of a user. One of them is thinking that Carlinhos is 15 now. It'll take at least 3 or 4 years for him to become a class 4 user. That might seem like a long time, but no one there is looking to start a war right now. Especially with the wedding coming up, they just want to push this issue down the road. The king then says that it's settled. The nobility would form an investigation team to look further into the assassination, and if any evidence was found, and they would take disciplinary action. This would remain in place until the moment Calix became a class 4 user. When that happened, the investigation team would be disbanded and succession would move forward. Antonio says it's a very wise decision, while thinking that these idiots have no idea who Calix really is. They think he must be a talented youth, but he knows how weak and talentless that idiot is. It would take years and years for him to reach class 4. if he ever did at all, which created the perfect setup for them. Finally, he was seeing the opportunity to put an end to those cursed shikens. That same afternoon, a guy named Lanciana went to speak with Antonio, asking why he was summoned. Antonio says he has a favorite ask, and it's something that the servant mustn't notice. The guy explains that it's going to be hard because this man is very alert, but obviously not impossible. Antonio says it doesn't matter. What he wants is for that guy to suffer a little. The man asks how, and he just tells him to use one of the Black Knights as always. It would be perfect to use the same one as before. After all, not getting your hands dirty in a situation like this is always the best move. Lanciana just bows, saying he understood and he's going to handle it. That same night in Gale's castle, the sucker Diddy is talking to the first prince, and the prince is saying that this plan was perfect. The moment His Majesty abandoned the royal faction, he stepped forward and united them once again. Really unusual. No one would have thought of it. Obviously, Diddy is confused. After all, he has no idea how Calix knew all this was going to happen. The problem is he doesn't want the prince to know it was all Calix's plan. So he says he foresaw all this because he's familiar with those guys' methods. This first prince isn't quite right in the head either. Every panel he's draped in gold, man. And he's saying that his time as an advisor must have really come in handy. Besides that, everyone in that castle now must be holding their heads, not knowing what to do. The boy, though, tells him to calm down. They landed a good blow, but the other side still got what they wanted. The engagement of the fifth prince still hadn't been broken. The prince wants to know how they're going to put an end to that, because obviously Gerald says it's going to be difficult. A royal wedding is the personification of a king's will. There wasn't much he could do, so unfortunately it's a shame, but he has no idea to give. The guy replies that it's all right. He was just thinking out loud and didn't think he'd actually have a plan. The only problem now is that he would start becoming a target. Garrett tells him not to worry. Now that he's stepped out from the king's shadow, he's become the sky that will light up all the nobility. With the support of almost the entire table, still of royal blood, for sure he's confident that most will follow him. The prince is excited, saying that just being the savior of the people sounds amazing. Besides that, he's thinking about making the Shikan territory part of their faction. Gerard says it's not a bad idea since Russell is an icon to many, and since he personally delivered the letter, it would make total sense. However, at the same time, they didn't need to give too many good things. It's not necessary to feed a fish twice after it's already been caught. The prince says he's confused. It was Ken Wright, Gerard, who brought the letter from Russell. So why don't they seem that close? Gerard explains that delivering the letter was just to settle a debt he had. Nothing more than a transaction. Right then, the first prince gives him a stare. Right man? Caught red-handed sucker. Said he made the whole plan. And now he admits he was just doing a transaction. He's already trembling, saying that this guy's eyes were just like Calix's. Every time that bastard looked at him with that face, it felt like he was staring into his soul. And then the first prince is already walking past, saying to get ready because he's heading to Shikan territory. Gerard, confused, wants to know if he's going personally. The prince says yes. He doesn't care if they reject him there. Besides, just interacting with that territory is going to seriously irritate Seal, who's the next successor. Gerard, though, realizes he's losing his chance. He wanted the prince to be interested in the wisdom he has. So why all of a sudden is he going to visit Shikan like that? The problem is, he can't stop it. And if he tries anything, it'll look suspicious. So he just bows and says, as you wish. A few days later, someone asks if Calix heard. He asks, heard what? And Russell says there are people out there saying he needs to become a class 4 as fast as possible. Our boy says not to worry, he already has an idea how to do that. Seems like he's looking for some dungeons to form on the map, but it's tough. Russell, however, is super hyped, saying you don't need to be smart to get strong, man. All he needs to do is take one step each day as fast as possible. He was going to make sure the boy would be class 4 soon. Calix is all shaking there, and Russell already grabs him by the arm, saying it's time for training. Next scene, out in the field, everyone's scared, even covering their faces and trembling, man. Another attack comes right at Calix's face, with Russell yelling for him to look up. Obviously, he takes it full on and is knocked out on the ground. Seems like the beatings and training are intense. He wonders if at this pace he's not going to end up dead in this other world. Next day, birds chirping in the morning and Russell's already waking him up, saying it's time for training. But man, the boy is completely wrecked and says he has to realize he has no skill for this. But the trainer says he doesn't need talent to master the sword. Anyone will become class 5 if they train diligently, and he's proof of that. Calix, the last if training this much isn't bad for the body, he's going to stunt his growth. He shows his injuries, and yeah, the boy got beat up all day long. But the trainer just says that injuries at that level can be healed with a low-level potion. Calix replies that they can't afford to buy potions. The territory is going through a serious financial crisis. But of course the guy says that thanks to him, that's a thing of the past. Now he'd rested enough, and it was time to get back to training. He yells that he hates this, but there he is again, holding his little sword, and another of Russell's attacks coming his way. At least now for the first time he was seeing the movement of the sword, which doesn't mean much since even seeing it, he still took a full hit to the head and ended up thinking how beautiful this guy was. Suddenly, he says to himself that he can't keep living like this. He has to get out of this situation soon and think of a way to escape it. Yeah, when he thinks of a girl, oops, missing our assassin, huh? She left and never came back, we really need a new one. He says he needs the strongest and first ally of the prince. She seemed to be the most skilled person in the game when it came to money. However, she and the first prince hadn't met yet at this point, which means maybe he can steal her. He's all excited. Russell obviously tells him to stop stalling and already pulls him by the arms. But just then our boy yells out that he has something really important to say. Of course, the old man warns that he won't accept any excuse to make him rest. If he tried to make anything up, training time would be increased tenfold. He had to understand that they stole 100,000 in silver bars, but they weren't using them. At the moment, they were useless, since they couldn't sell them, or it would be obvious, which obviously put them in a risky position, since anyone would want to steal them. The protagonist says that's exactly why they need someone to launder that money. Russell knows this kid is definitely making this up just to stop training, but unfortunately, it really is a problem. But he asks if they really need to do this now. Our boy says the plan is to lend those gold bars to someone and profit from the interest, man. Not just interest, compound interest, which was better than magic. Russell says he's never heard of this so-called magic of compound interest, but our boy tells him to trust. It's amazing. He replies fine, since it would be good to get rid of those bars soon. He wants to know how long it'll take. Calix, who knows he can't say too long, but also can't say too short, says maybe 3 months. He thinks he made the perfect offer. This way it'd be impossible for Russell to refuse. But Russell, of course he's no fool, already realizes he's kind of being tricked. But with no real choice because of the bars, he says he'll leave it to Krot to be responsible for his his daily training. Calix says there's no need to go that far, but obviously Russell says that's the bare minimum. Next morning, Krot says he has a very interesting piece of news. Seems like the first prince was heading there. Calix wants to know why, and he says this guy is going through a succession war, and it looks like he's coming to take this territory and annex it. Right away, Calix is already getting ready and asks what the problem is. Wow, the guy said they didn't know that man. It'd be best to prepare the carriages and horses quickly. They were leaving in 2 hours. Krot asks how our boy's going to do that. He doesn't even know how to ride a horse yet. He just shuts the suitcase and says he'll learn on the way. Let's go, man. Our boy says everyone knows very well the name of that bastard. Gale Rochula Clevio Krakow. What a big name. And it seems he's one of the few hero-level people in this game. 29 years old from the royal family with a reputation of mystery and currently low support. But of course, what's strong about him is down there, that SSS rank military talent man. And Calix isn't running away because he's afraid to fight the prince, but because he knows how cunning the prince is when it comes to recruiting people. If he meets him, he'll definitely end up getting recruited by this guy. And with that, he already turns to Krot and tells him to shut up and just go. Krot is still a bit confused about what he's saying and already remembers the beatings he'll get from Russell if he doesn't keep up with the boy properly. So he yells out, asking the prince to wait. 2 hours later, Calix is in front of the house, pointing at the other one, wanting to know where the bastard is. He told the bastard to be quick, but he was too slow. That's when he sees our dear Layla. And oh, how we missed her. Where's your assassin outfit? You're so well behaved, my girl. He asks what she's doing, and she just says that thanks to his efforts, it seems no one was bothering her. The Shadow faction collapse, and there are several deserters like her. Obviously, he wants to know what her plans are. All sad, she says she hasn't decided yet. How about you stick with this little blonde boy? Wouldn't it be nice to stay by his side, huh? Layla is all emotional, saying she dreamed her whole life about this freedom, but now that she got it, she doesn't know what to do. That's why she just goes wherever she feels she has to and sees what happens. Our boy gets all emotional and calls out to her, turning around like he's going to give her a kiss. Ah, damn, it looked like he was gonna invite her to come along, and he says that if he had the chance, he'd go to the Holy Empire of Granada. She asks if that isn't the place with a bunch of mana artifacts and techniques that work specifically for women. He just replies that she doesn't have to believe him, but that it was the best option. She thanks him and says it's fine, that if she had one more chance, she'd like to meet him again. Man, wow, this boy is cold. He just thanks her and says goodbye, thinking to himself that it's a shame, but he can't keep her close anymore. That's because she wasn't even that talented of a person, not someone with exceptional abilities. Next man, damn Calix, cold and calculating. What's this kid? Ice cold heart. Look at her there, all pretty, turning away in her hoodie, waving goodbye, and off she goes. He just keeps thinking about how she said they'd meet again soon. Then he goes to Albie's grave and says he was the person who died more honorably than anyone else. That was the guy who took a hit in the back to save him. And now he let Layla go because her status window showed that her max level was very low. Maybe he needed to stop seeing everyone here as just a character in a game. Yeah, maybe that'd be a good idea, you bastard. You can't just let her go like that, man. How's the artist supposed to work now? But anyway, we've already cried for everyone who died and left. It was time to move on. I thought it was just him and Krot, but the whole gang's there. He says, let's go already, man. 3 days later, already at the border of Shikan territory, it seems Prince Gale's group had gotten close. That night, there he was in Shikan territory having dinner beside Russell, saying that this was amazing. Russell apologizes for his food being a bit bland compared to the capital, but the prince says it's fine. He was drinking a lot, surrounded by amazing people, so that was enough. It was just a shame that the successor of his place wasn't present. Russell apologizes, but says that a letter arrived for the boy a few days ago, and he had to leave. The first prince senses that they're kind of avoiding saying why exactly the boy left. He only got unsatisfying answers, but if he kept asking here, it would seem weird. Besides, Russell seemed like the kind of person who couldn't pick up on subtle things, so he says it's a shame because he really wanted to meet the boy. Of course, he also didn't want Russell to take it the wrong way. It was a pleasure to meet him. Russell just taps the glass on the table and says he's honored to hear something like that from the prince. The two stare at each other, and sometime later, the prince is yelling, saying he's going to get straight to the point. He needs full support. He knows that Shikan has already broken ties with the Kokurin, so in any case, they already think they're allies, especially considering he personally delivered that letter to the king. Russell leans forward a bit, man, a guy with so much muscle that just a slight nod makes them pop. The prince says either way, he wants to know how they met Gerard, right? Obviously, the first prince is trying to understand since Gerard said he was just paying off a debt or doing some sort of job. Russell, however, asks if he really wasn't informed. The guy gets caught off guard and says he wants to hear their side of the story, but it seems like he didn't like that. Of course, he, as the first prince, received the information, so it doesn't even make sense for the guy to ask this. What's driving him crazy is that he can't understand the intentions of this old man. Then Russell says he'll explain, including why Calix didn't come. He was sick when he got the king's letter. That's why they sent a messenger to inform them, but the letter never arrived. Gale tells him to explain, saying it's strange. But Russell just gives the lamest excuse, saying the guy who was carrying the letter fell off his horse and twisted his ankle. Right after that, Gerard showed up with an offer, saying he wanted help to escape from Servius, and saying that if they guaranteed his escape, he would forget all the debts owed by Shikan. With that, he received the letter to take to the capital. But they had no idea things would end up like this. Gale is just staring, thinking that unfortunately, he still can't find anything suspicious, which is super annoying. He knows Russell is a respected knight, but it seems that's all. He has no other exceptional talents. Now it's all clear. Right. He wants to find out who it was that wrote that letter, knowing the whole plan. He's already sure it wasn't Gerard because that guy is dumb. And now, apparently, it couldn't have been Russell either. Not to mention that the last possible person in this place would be that Calix guy, but he heard that kid is always sick, so he's not even worried about him. Still, all he needs to do is take what brings him profit. With that, he smiles and says he's going to have to ask a question he already knows the answer to. Would Viscount Russell be supporting him? Obviously asking what the position of the Shikan family is in the succession issue, from first to fifth prince. The bastard is just staring, but Russell says that the family and the Count of Shikan formally declared their support for His Highness Gale Roch. Here he comes again with that crazy face of his, saying, that's the spirit. Russell, however, says he has to give a slightly bold opinion. They had a request to make to the prince. He's a bit confused, and we cut to 3 days earlier. We see our Calix telling Russell that the prince would obviously ask for their support. In any case, they couldn't support the fifth prince, Seal. Russell says he understands since that guy seems to be the grandson of Marcus Antonio. Right, the one who caused all that mess with them. Calix says that's part of it too, but also that they wouldn't gain much from that guy. Of course, either way, saying they'll support the first prince carries a lot of risk. Russell asks what the demands will be. Our boy says he wants them to no longer pay taxes on the merchant guilds in that region. Even in the game world, avoiding taxes is too good. Russell asks, confused, why he wants that if they don't even have a merchant guild in that territory. Our femboy's all sitting with his legs crossed, saying they disbanded because of financial hardship, but obviously that can't stay like that forever. Besides, the country is going to be divided into two factions, and even though both princes are powerful, each one influences their own territory. And if they're under the first prince, obviously they could ask for something like that. They would suggest 1,000 magical artifacts per year, and he knows the prince will try to play hardball, but in the end, he'll agree without much hesitation. Apparently, he doesn't want to pay tax on 1,000 sales, and of course, Russell says that's too little. But our boy says not to worry and to just offer it. He's got a plan. Russell replies, fine then. As always, the kid must have some unconventional plan that he just doesn't understand. Back to the present, the prince tells him to say it already. If it's something he can do, he'll definitely make it happen. Now the mustache guy was smiling. Everything was working out just as the young master had said. The next day, the boy is exhausted from riding all night right, so nobody could catch up to them. Krot, relaxed, tells him that they're almost arriving in the city of Poznu, and then they'll be able to rest a bit. Our boy, though, has a sore butt from riding. My god, with that appearance already and saying something like that, peculiar. He tries to blame him for it, and Krot asks, who else are you gonna blame then? At that, our boy just tells him to shut up and stop being a pain. Krot laughs, saying a 15-year-old boy obviously would be a bit too sensitive. On the other hand, our boy is thinking that if he met the owner of this body, he'd beat him up for never training this crap. Look who's talking, huh? A guy who only runs away from training. At that, Krot asks why they're going to Poznu when in theory they're heading to the capital. Calyx says it's because he absolutely doesn't want to meet the first prince, so they're taking a different route. I ask why so much fear, and he says it's not fear at all. As if he'd be scared of that guy. Krot looks a little awkward, and our boy says he already planned to pass through this place on the way back. The only thing that changed was the order of things. As if he were running away from the first prince. Krot's got a little smirk going. Calyx knows that, as always, the bastards are thinking he's just some kind of kid. Our boy knows he has to become class 4, but with Russell's training, it's going to take an eternity, and that's the reason he came to Poznu. There's a dungeon in this region where you can get an S-rank skill. A dungeon with a good reward is already rare, especially ones he can do with his weak body. To complete any of the other ones, they need a giant expedition party. Obviously, though, nobles would start complaining, and that's where Poznu stands out. It's a free city without any nobles, a place where you can easily hire mercenaries and form parties without trouble. He points to the horizon, saying they finally reached the free city of Poznu. At the entrance, they were told to line up and sign the documents. Our boy is just a skeleton at that point, saying he lied on the form. Already at an inn, our boy thanks everyone for their hard work. Before they left again, though, they needed to get the fatigue out of their bodies, and he asks if anyone knows a good place for that. The guys are all excited, asking if he means that place. Krot is shocked that he'd suggest something like that, but oh well, everyone's already heading out. I thought they were going to the house of the world's oldest profession, but that's not the case. They're just out there in the middle of the city where there's food, a little party going on, when suddenly, someone welcomes everyone. Another fanboy enters the scene and already pulls Krot's arm, saying this place has the best alcohol in town. Apparently, Calyx already recognizes it and comes in, saying the place seems pretty good. Inside, it's just a normal little bar, and everyone's asking why Krot isn't drinking. He replies that if anything happens to the young master, he has to be at 100%, so he's going to avoid that. Our boy, who was observing, then sees the guy who pulled him in at the entrance and calls out to him, who turns around kind of confused. Calyx walks over, telling him to come closer and asks if there's a quieter place or even another shop would be fine. The kid replies that there is, but obviously, if he takes them to another place, he's going to run into trouble. Besides, it seemed like his men were enjoying themselves, so he didn't need to. Calyx, however, says he just needs a guide to take him and one other person to a quiet hall. He tosses a gold coin in the air and says that will be the payment. The kid grabs it all happy and says he gets it, but in return, he'd have to leave the rest of the nights there eating and drinking. The boy says that's fine and calls for Krot. Sometime later, they're in the city, with the kid showing them the way. Our boy asks if he's lived in Poznu for long, and he says yes, for over 10 years. That surprises our boy, who says he doesn't even look like he's 10 years old, which makes the kid swear, saying he's 14. Krot is just laughing at the two of them, but then Calyx asks, if he's been there for 10 years, he must know who the strongest person in Poznu is. A little embarrassed, the kid says it's probably Mr. Omar, who is the leader of the Steel Shield mercenaries. But the truth is, he's never fought the other 3 leaders, so maybe it's just a rumor. Calyx tells him to talk about the other 2 groups then, and he's surprised that the boy doesn't know anything. But he explains the other groups are the Red Wolf and the Black Wing. Together, the 3 make up the largest mercenary groups in the city. Our boy asks how the spring hunting went, and he replies that since the taverns are packed, it definitely wasn't bad. But apparently the adults are worried because something called the supermoon is coming. At that moment, the kid says they've arrived. Everyone is standing in front of a giant mansion. A super dark-looking girl suddenly shows up, saying she knows they don't have a reservation. So what are they doing there? Our boy takes a look and says it was this kid who guided him there. The woman says Yurine did that again, but she loses her temper, saying they're closed today and asks them to leave. But then she notices something strange and catches Calyx's gaze. It seems like he's looking at the ring, and that looks a little worrying to her. I don't know why. Maybe the boy is into married women. At that moment, the guy tries to say that Yurine didn't guide him properly, so he'll have to give that coin back. The kid gets startled and says that's not true. He guided them just fine. Then he hides and says that now he realizes they weren't looking for women, but for information, so he's not giving that back. But then the woman calls Yurine's name, and he starts trembling, hand going into his pocket. In that panic, our boy gives her a stare. Status window active man. Celestina Urina was the one he was looking for. Not just the girl, but down below it shows she has an SS rank finance talent. In the future, she'd become the one we've been searching for. It's just a shame she won't have a kid. Damn this story. I'm already missing Layla. Obviously, Calyx is excited. Seems like his whole plan to travel to the capital was just an excuse to find this person. But by chance, he found her right there. He then asks if this is the place where he can get information, and she says yes. But suddenly, man, the other woman there already tells the guys to raise their crossbows and orders Urina to get away from him. Right away, Krot draws his sword and says they have no idea who they're pointing those at. The woman, though, replies that in a high-class hall like this, it's rare for people to be so ignorant as to insist. But once in a while, people like them show up, and that's why they have to be careful. Obviously, if they left quietly now, nothing would happen to them. But Calyx says she's being too rigid. If she keeps turning people away the moment they arrive without even having a conversation, how is she supposed to gain new allies? Urina is asking to give them a chance, but the woman just tells her to shut up. Then Calyx says that the woman might have a beauty that defies age, but she didn't seem to be smarter than the young master. Maybe it's Urina who's actually the master of the house? Now I'm a bit confused. But the woman seems to know just how talented the girl is. She says fine then and tells him to say what he is before he ends up with a hole in his forehead. Calyx simply replies that she probably already knows, so it'd be best for her to take off that ring and give it to the girl behind her. The woman just asks if he has any idea what that means, to which our boy replies that with the symbol of Agrapnes, my god, what a difficult name, it's obvious he knows. Why wouldn't she want to be recognized walking around like that? Daenerys even gave a little wink, and just like that, she yells out the name Prince Calyx, already aiming arrows, man. Of course the bastard says that apparently she knew who he was from the start and should have just said so. What he doesn't get is whether she just knows his name, or she knows how he found this place, or what information he wants, and what he came there to offer or receive. The woman is kind of confused. It seems only royalty should be able to recognize her because of that ring, which makes it all weirder, since this kid is just the heir of some regional territory. Calyx realizes she's confused and asks if she's really not going to answer anything. He calls for Urina and wants to know her opinion. Urina replies that the more complex a problem is, the simpler the answer. Calyx seems smart and maybe was the kind of person who doesn't forget what he sees. That royal symbol appears in countless history books, so he must have seen it somewhere. Of course, it was also just the symbol of a long-dead family that meant nothing now. While the woman is yelling at the two of them, they're busy complimenting each other. Then she asks for patience, says fine, and tells them to lower their weapons. Right then she turns around and says that this place is too exposed and tells him to get inside already. Man, the living room already has a bed, huh? This really is the house of the working women, my guy. Just one room for fun. Wow, the boy is thinking the same thing, man. This is the kind of place you walk into, eat and drink, head to bed, and goodbye. He then says that being in that hall with a woman was a little tense. But the other woman just replies that she hasn't even decided yet if she's going to let him go home safely or not. Calyx, however, says that the one who should be trying to convince him is her. The hospitality of this place was terrible. They should at least be serving some tea. The woman claps her hands, man, and the tough working ladies arrive. Looks like they're all known as the daughters of Eridona. Maybe that's the name of the older woman, right? And these tough ones are the ones financially backing the first prince, man. Oh, and our girl is here because she's planning to invest the money he stole into them, right, kid? Trust is the most important thing for a merchant. The only problem is that Urina is still too young right now. The question is, will he wait for her to grow up to make an offer or buy her now and manage her himself? Stating that he drank the tea without hesitation, the woman asks if he's not afraid it might be poisoned. But the rascal replies that if it was poison, he'd already know. She's a little confused with this sickly boy and says they should just get back to the topic. First, they wouldn't make any deals unless they were sure he'd keep the secret. But our boy just throws 100,000 into the air, man. She's all thrown off and he says that's right. He was going to invest 100,000 gold. Before she can reply, he says actually he's the one who wants to know if she won't take the money and disappear. Before the woman can answer, someone says that's way too much money to turn down. Everyone looks over, man. It's Urina, already changed clothes and her hair's grown out. It was tied up inside the hat. Sneaky girl. She says her name is Celestina Urina, but for now she's just a fugitive, so they could call her Urini. Apparently she's actually a princess, man. That king's got a bunch of kids spread across the world like every king in a story, right? Our boy already realized she was just pretending to be a naive little girl. Looks like it was worth it. Just buy this crazy girl already. That's what I'm guessing. Okay, I'm not even sure if he wants to buy her or not. I'm kind of confused too. But he says being a princess doesn't guarantee she has the ability to make money, and if she wants his investment, she'll have to explain herself. Urina says they have a network of fugitives and spies that can gather information super fast. And obviously the basics of investing are to buy low and sell high, right, man? He replies that he understands she's trying to profit through distribution, but that was a field with some pretty harsh competition. Besides, there was no guarantee her rivals, the royal merchants, would play by the rules. They had way more powerful people backing them, and at any moment her resources could be blocked. She's a little thrown off and says every business has its risks, but you shouldn't underestimate this organization. It's not like they couldn't smuggle things. Calyx says that can't be the case. The money has to be used legally. That's because he wants to prove the honest origin of the business. Basically legitimize it in the market, right? Urina immediately understands and says he probably stole it from someone, to which he responds that he would never steal. That was compensation for moral damage done to him. She repeats it and he stands up, telling her to stop saying he steals money. Besides, it was her who should be convincing him she won't run off with his money. And she says he doesn't have to worry, because the simplest way to solve that is for her to become the hostage herself. Madame Eridona right there, man, says she's going crazy. But Urina says 10 years have already passed. Her people have been wandering for a long time through these unknown lands. At this rate, they'd always remain a criminal group. The whole organization would collapse. The woman is hesitant, but Urina insists, saying that with 100,000 gold coins it would be enough to help the whole family. Not to mention that she doesn't even care about reclaiming her position. All she wants is for them not to suffer hardship anymore. But man, Calyx just tells both of them to cut the theatrics. The other woman over there got pissed, obviously turned around cursing, but he just replies that he doesn't care about her past. If she was expecting to be treated like a princess, she should go back to the kingdom of Jadpur right now. The other one is fuming, but then Urina stands up, grabs a knife, cuts her hair, and says she's not a princess anymore. He should be confused, thinking she didn't want to follow the business world, and he was sure he already had an idea she'd do something like that. Calyx says his plan was to take everything with her, but unfortunately, she was still too young for him to trust. Until that changes, he would guide her. Urina tells him to answer. How old is he anyway, since he doesn't look that much older? Holy crap, I'm finding this funny. Even if she's more mature, she's still just a kid in the end. The negotiator says he's only there to provide the money. Besides, his age doesn't matter here. right? Since he's the one bankrolling everything. Urina sits down and tells him to go ahead and say his plan already, but he says that before that, he needs his issue resolved. They want the information he asked for. Urina tells the other woman to deliver everything, and she just replies, whoever has God, rise up. The boys notice the woman who was cursing at him before has now completely changed. Apparently, she knows how to separate business from emotion. In a room full of books and papers all over the floor, she says he'll find all the info he needs to read. He thanks her and says he's starting now. Next morning, he wakes up exhausted. He's not even that concerned about the Urina stuff anymore. The issue now is figuring out how to conquer the dungeon. The first option is to go with the elite members he brought, or, obviously, hire other mercenaries. The problem with too many mercenaries is it increases the chances of secrets leaking. That's why the best option would be to go with just an elite team. In that case, he at least need a mage. Because for his team full of knights, a single mage would make a massive difference in strategy. That's why these bastards are so valuable. And after checking all the records of the city, he found a rank 6 mage, the most powerful one living in the region. An old man known as Edelin Belchua. Right away, he wants to ask Urina something, but Manhwa says she's in class, and bam, door in his face. Another maid arrives, telling him to have some tea in the meantime. Looking at his own reflection, our boy can't believe he found a guy like that. A rank 6 was the equivalent of Russell, right? But a mage. The problem for our boy is that before his father, the Shikin family didn't have anything in this world, and he's the first person to take over right after, without it even being official. So the chances of that Edelin accepting are really low. Then Urina shows up, already asking where the money is and when they're starting the business. But he tells her to calm down first. He needs to do something else before that. Besides, the project with her would take at least 6 months to 1 year to kick off. She's mad but tries to stay calm and shows a paper. It's a confirmation of a 30,000 gold coin deposit. She says it looks legit, but it's only 30,000, right? And he replies that obviously he wasn't going to just send all 100,000 out of nowhere. Urina agrees and says for now, that amount from her big bro is enough. He's kind of confused with this big bro thing, and she just says that anyone who gives that much money is automatically a big bro man. Then she tells him to go ahead and say why he called her there. He then asks if she knows someone named Edelin Belchua, and from her reaction, it's obvious she does. Immediately, Aridona appears from the corner, saying that Edelin Belchua is suspected of being a black mage. Urina says he's not, and the woman agrees, but she's just giving the heads up so he's aware and avoids suspicion. Calix has already gathered a lot of information on this guy. Seems like he's someone with a difficult personality but not a bad person. Then he says that if anything happens, he'll take responsibility, but he wants to know where the guy is. Aridona, however, warns him that she's not going to say anything and that he'd better forget about this person. But I don't get it, man. 1 second later, she's already talking, saying that if he heads to the north gate of Poznu, there's a cemetery up on the village mountain and a small house. Obviously, the guy is right there. He asks how well they know him, and she says they only know what's written in the books. He's someone who distanced himself from this place a few years ago and seems to be focused on some weird experiments. Besides that, he almost never goes out. He asked about the experiments, and she says that obviously, mages hate when anything about their research leaks. Urina, however, is hesitant. She asks if he's really going to that old man's house. Confused, he wants to know why she's acting like that. Did he do something? Urina says that every time she sees him, she gets the feeling she's going to end up broke for some reason. He better be careful. No matter how tempting the offer is, he should refuse. Then she asks if he understood, and he says yes, he completely understood. She then says that especially he was not to use the 100,000 he promised to invest in her because that was already hers. He realizes that apparently something happened between them, but right then, Aridona takes Urina away. Not understanding any of that, it was time to go meet Tadwi Loon up north at a community cemetery. Krot says they've arrived, and both of them think it looks like a little house from a fairy tale. They go to the door, knock, and ask if anyone's there. The person inside just replies that whoever it is, just open the door and come in. The two of them are looking at each other, while our boy thinks, this guy must be confident. Huh. If it was a monster, an attack, a bandit, who just lets people walk in like that. The door opens, and he's sure this guy is confident in what he does. With the cauldron and stuff on the shelves, the place gives off black mage vibes. Not to mention the man himself gave off a completely different impression than the books. He stares at the old man, then coughs and says he came to meet him and introduces himself as Calix Shikin. Edelin replies that it's a shame, but he knows nothing of the outside world, so if he just said a great name, he has no idea. Wow, now he says he's not from some great family and that title doesn't mean much. And even if it did, it's not something that compares to someone who reached the level of Archmage. The old man turns and says he's good with words. It's just a shame he doesn't have time to sit around chatting with him, so if he doesn't get to the point, they'll be kicked out now. Calix gets straight to the point, man. He says, I want to conquer a dungeon nearby and thought you might give me a hand, friend. The old man asks if he's talking about the Impalan Mountains. Our boy smiles and says that's exactly the one. The old man drops his spoon and turns around, saying it's been a long time since he's seen a kid as crazy as this one. Our boy is calm while Krot is losing it. Seems like he's mad the old man won't stop insulting Calix, but he's up against an Archmage, what's he gonna do? Calix then says he's not going to hold back on the offer. The old man asks if he's talking about money. That was something that only had value if he survived, so it was best to go home if he valued his life. Out of nowhere, Calix loses it and says that if the old man needs anything for his research, he just has to ask. But the old man yells back, saying it seems like he's just there to snoop around his research and they better get lost. The two are trembling, and in the next scene, he's face down on the table. Urina asks if he lost all the money, and he says that Dan old man wasn't even interested in his money. She thinks it's strange, and our boy asks her to just explain her story with that old man. She then explains that when Edelin got there, she invested some money. He asks what happened, and she says that obviously old man never paid her back. Krot gets mad and says it's insane. An old man stealing money from a child, since obviously she must have been even younger back then. Calix asks if she has a contract, and she says obviously she does, she won't lose it until she gets paid. Seems like the old man owed 30 gold, which was 6 years of Krot's salary. Now I'm confused. Didn't he offer 100,000? If 30 gold is 6 years of work, then how much is 100,000? Yeah, you can do the math here, right? That's like 20,000 years of work. I think they're mixing up the values, or maybe there's going to be a plot twist coming. But yeah, Urina is a wreck. Krot asks how she stayed so calm after all that, and she immediately yells, saying that clearly she's not calm. But that damned old man has no money to pay back, he's just like Krot, who's broke. Poor guy even got roasted for free. Calix says that if she wants, he can take on the contract. She doesn't need to worry about it. But Yurina says there's no way she's letting that old man work hard and still get paid double with interest. Our boy makes a face and says maybe that'd be easy to pull on a regular person, but it's not going to work on a rank 6 mage. She asks if he's saying there's no way to get it back, and he says probably not. That's because she didn't just give the old man money. She invested it to be part of the profits, meaning she took on the risk of failure. Maybe if she were stronger, she could recover the investment, but clearly, she's not. Yurina replies that he doesn't seem much stronger than the old man either. She saw his training, and it wasn't impressive. They argue, and Calyx realizes that as smart as she seems, she's still very inexperienced. The fact she thought a contract was enough to control a rank 6 mage showed how much of a child she still was. He says she has to learn that a merchant also needs to know when they've lost. The next step is to create a new opportunity to recover. At least if she made the contract, she must know what he was researching, since she invested in it. And with that, he says he'll take on the contract for 50 gold. She's looking beat up, but says fine, on one condition, that she gets to see everything that happens. Yurina walks off and gives a thumbs up to Krat. A while later, she brings all the books related to the old man's research. Our boy is about to look at them, but right then, Aridona is walking down the hallway and calls for the princess. They turn around and she's kind of hunched over, trying to explain something. A bit later, she finds out what happened and is fuming, saying she already made it clear. No business deals behind her back. Yurina replies that in the end, she always says no to everything. So the woman takes her away, saying today's lesson will be extra long. Krat and Calyx look at each other and say it's time to get to work. The day fades with them spending all their time there reading about that old man's experiments and studies. Calyx is starting to think convincing that guy is going to be harder than he expected. Maybe it'd be better to go swim through the dungeon first or go and come back later to convince him. Kind of show that he can survive a little. Then he wakes up Krat, who asks where they're going. Our boy says they're going to hunt for mercenaries and head to the dungeon. But here, we are the next day. Looks like he called the guy just to go to sleep, apparently. There they are in front of the mercenary district. As soon as he walks in, man, everyone in the place goes quiet and stares. Looks like this is not the kind of place a high-ranking noble should be walking into. But then Calyx steps forward and says he's there to hire some mercenaries. Hesitant, everyone trembling, the guy says he understands, but asks him to wait a moment. The two of them are confused, and Krat says he must have gone to call whoever's in charge. An old man then shows up, thanking the two for their presence. But Krat already steps in front of Calyx, and in the reflection of our boy's eye, you can tell he's already seen this guy's status window and says that, yeah, he's no joke. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the window. Damn it. Our boy then says he heard that class 4 or higher mercenaries are rare. The old man says yes, because when someone reaches that level, they usually go off to a rural territory and live as a knight. Oof, he just threw shade at Krat, and you can tell he felt it. The guy opens the door, but says many still prefer the free life and stay there. He says what surprises him is that the boy came in person. He should have just sent a representative. But Calyx replies that he's sure a representative wouldn't secure the contract he wants. The old man stares, realizing that this damn kid looks young, but clearly wasn't going to be easy to deal with. Already inside the room, he asks the boy to explain what he's looking for. Calyx immediately says that the mission's danger level is rank A, and that's why the reward would be 2.5 times greater than their weekly payment, and he wants the contract to last 1 month. The contract could be extended in 2-week increments with additional pay. He would also pay half up front. Any rank S mercenary serving on this mission would have full authority over the formation. He wanted a maximum of 120 combatants and 80 support units. The old man's suspicions are confirmed. Man, he already realizes this damn kid wouldn't be easy. All the request details were crystal clear, but he still didn't know exactly what this mission was, and the conditions were very well balanced. He'd seem weak if he accepted, but also kind of foolish to reject something with such good reasoning. He then replies that finding a group of that size willing to accept will be difficult, and asks for more details. Calyx says that's fine, but if he shares any information, the reward will be reduced. Our boy is confident man. After playing this damn game and getting denied thousands and thousands of times, negotiations are where he shines. To him, this guy was an amateur. Man, the guy says all right. He'll accept the conditions exactly as they are. He extends his hand and says he's never met a noble like him. All he asks is that he guarantee most of the mercenaries come back alive. Calyx replies that he'll do his best. The old man then asks where the boy is staying, so he can send the mercenary captain to speak with him. The details could be discussed with that guy. Our boy thanks him, and a while later he's walking through the city sighing, relieved. He thought it would be a lot harder. Krat just says he negotiated really well and asks where he learned that. Obviously, he can't say he used to work in a sales company, so he decides to totally ignore the question and says maybe now's a good time for a drink. But someone was watching and saw that he had gone into the mercenary guild. It's suspicious for a noble to be in this region. That's because Poznu is the only free city in this land, right? No nobles. No one rules it except the people. It's known as the famous sanctuary of mercenaries. That's because no matter what crime you've committed, here, it's forgiven. It could be a runaway slave, a noble who fled another nation, or even someone who killed 1,000,000. In Poznu, everything is forgiven. The only thing everyone is required to do is fight the monster wave that comes from the mountains. It all started because when monsters kill people and feed, they seem to return to the mountain. And that's why the first ones sent to face them were always criminals and people who, if they died, it wouldn't matter. And it's because of that start that the city became what it is. And this buffed up guy full of muscle is the underworld boss named Valter, and he says this is really bold. In front of him is someone called Corvus, and he wants to know how the bastard has the courage to show up there. Corvus replies that considering the past, his own head should have been taken. But as a black knight, all of that was left behind. Valter's pissed that this bastard is mocking him, but he's more curious how trash like this guy managed to reach class 6. So he tells him to spit out what he wants. Valter comments about a group of nobles who arrived in the city and asks if he knows anything. Valter says no, and Corvus replies that they seem to have made some kind of request to the mercenaries, and he's there to order them to properly investigate why. Valter asks what the pay is, and the guy says there will be an advance, but the real payment depends on the quality of the information he brings. Plus, he better act quickly, or he'll end up with nothing. With that, Corvus leaves, and Valter's burning with the desire to kill the bastard. He tells his guys to bring everything, and shortly after, the document is on the table. When he takes a look at the request, he wonders. Is this lunatic trying to start a war? The guy reads, danger level A, duration of 3 months and a force of nearly 200 men. This wasn't a war since they didn't border any enemy nation. Walter says he understands, but this was a high-rank mission. Not to mention that dungeons are made for small elite teams, not brute forces like that. Maybe it was some kind of hunt. He doesn't get it. Corvus says it doesn't make sense. If it were a hunt for a few monsters, they'd just lose money, and obviously they couldn't be that stupid. Walter suggests ending the kid before sending that many mercenaries to their deaths, or robbing the boy. Corvus, however, replies that apparently he's always walking around the Class 5 knight. A buddy says that the other one is Class 6, so they should just kill. But Corvus says it is impossible to kill a Class 5 without leaving a trace behind, meaning everything would be found out. Not to mention that if in the middle of all this the kid uses a return scroll, then everything's over. For now, it's best to wait for the perfect opportunity. They'll assume the boy's target is the dungeon and act accordingly. But obviously, once he enters that place, he won't be able to use a return scroll, and that's when they'll strike. The guy asks if the plan is to just take out the mercenaries, and the reply is yes. Now I'm confused. Why are they trying to kill our boy? What did he do to these guys, man? He just arrived in the city, hired some mercenaries, and that's not allowed. But there it is, Walter says killing without mercenaries won't be easy, so he expects extra payment. The guy responds that he'll be paid whatever he wants. Not by him, but by the one who hired him, someone with much more money than him and who knows what they're doing. Ah, now it's clear. Looks like someone's trying to assassinate our boy, probably the guys from the Empire. Okay, the pieces are falling into place. In this city, there are 3 mercenary groups, man, and the reason each of them came together wasn't because they like each other. No. For example, the Blackwing guys were thrown out as food for the monsters, while the Shield guys were the ones who didn't let them escape and get eaten, so they were fine. At the same time, conflict was avoided because at any moment, the guys from Red Wolf were eager to wipe out the other 2. But none of the 3 groups start a war because their strength is about even, and the one not involved would take advantage. That's how an extremely delicate balance is maintained, and the city, in theory, is peaceful. The groups, however, are constantly watching each other, looking for any sign of battle or preparation. Meanwhile, back in the Steel Shield mercenaries camp, someone shouts that the bastards are preparing. The white-haired guy asks what's going on, and the other explains that it looks like the Blackwing people are bringing everyone back from outside to the headquarters. If that's the case, it's time for them to get ready too. Looks like a fight's about to start in the city, and the scene shifts to Urina's castle. Someone says no way, and she's insisting, saying that if she's a hostage, she has to go with him wherever he goes. Obviously, it's our boy who says he hasn't invested in her yet, so she's not a hostage. Also, it'd be good if she stopped saying that nonsense every time they talk. Urina says that if she doesn't go, he'll end up regretting it later. He's a bit confused, wondering why she's so confident saying something like that. Misha replies that fine, she can go to the dungeon entrance and no further. After that, she can make a little hut and wait there for him. She accepts immediately, and he already realizes this brat must be planning to go to the entrance and sneak in. But then Aridona appears. I was already wondering if this woman would really let that girl go. And she says that no matter how strong or secure she is, taking a girl like that to the front of a dungeon is insane. He replies that it's not his fault. She's the one insisting. But Aridona answers that even though Urina is a princess with her own opinions, she's still a child and he's responsible. Confused, he replies that he's a child too, and clearly he opposed it. Aridona instantly pulls the princess away, and our boy finally feels relieved. But he also realizes that Aridona doesn't seem to like him from the very beginning. Our boy says that Aridona needs someone to take care of her. He's not sure if he means a man or what, but he thinks she's way too obsessed with Urina, though she doesn't have such a bad appearance. If she found someone to take care of the girl, maybe she'd chill out a bit. Yeah, my man literally said she needs a husband. In the bar, the guys are talking about the madame and how much she cares about the young girl. One of them looks over with a big mug in hand and says they should have killed that noble the last time he visited. Then the other guy hands over the money and says not to worry, that they'll keep an eye on them. The guy says that the brat must have seduced the young girl, and now she's probably all deluded by his sweet little promises. He didn't like that guy from the moment he saw him. The one in the hood isn't saying anything, and he asks what the next orders are. What was he thinking? And what were they gonna do if everyone gets dragged into that dungeon? Urina could end up dead. The guy slams the mug on the table and says the boy is knave, thinks that to win in a dungeon, all you need is more people. His friend agrees and says things are only getting worse, since it looks like the Steel guys and Blackwing are about to start a war. The one in the hood says this is the perfect chance for them to join the mission and hang back just to observe. After that, they return to eliminate or negotiate with the survivors. Now back to our boy. A guy walks through the door and introduces himself as Trias. Anything related to the mercenary group should be discussed with him. Calyx seems surprised, and the guy even has a paper proving he's a rank S. He immediately asks if Calyx wants him to choose the people who'll join the mission, but our boy is just staring at him, which leaves Trias a little confused. As always, he's looking at a status window that we don't get to see. Damn it, man. What do you think this is, an anime? Put that thing on the screen already, you bastard. Our boy seems lucky to have found this guy who asks what the issue is, but Calyx says nothing. He just says you can choose, but if you think 10 people are enough, hire 13. Trias says the contract shows he wants to inspect everyone at the end before participation, but he adds that even those who are selected but don't participate will be paid the same. He asks if Calyx is sure about that. Calyx agrees, and the guy says okay then. Help prepare everything. Then our boy hands him a paper and says he also wants everyone to bring one item from the list. These were the resources needed for the dungeon exploration, but only he should know the entire list. Trias says he understands. It must be for confidentiality and asks if there's anything else. Our boy says no, but then the guy adds just one more thing. How did the boy find this place? Our boy is confused, and the guy asks if he has a favorite companion at the house. Reminder, our boy is currently living at the girl's brothel, and strangely, Calyx seems to realize this guy probably likes Aridona. Not sure how. Maybe he sensed some jealousy. Our boy's got 300 IQ. But he explains he was just at a bar, asked for a quieter place, and ended up being introduced to the house. He felt comfortable there and decided to stay. He asks why the guy wants to know that, and the guy says it's nothing. But clearly the man's thinking at least the boy has no intentions with the madame. Feeling relieved, he then asks if Calyx plans to hire more mercenaries. In his experience, there are only 2 types of rank and missions. Those where mercenaries are hired just to die, with no chance of victory or obviously a dungeon expedition. Calyx realizes this guy is already sure he's not preparing for war. But at the very least, he doesn't know which dungeon Calyx is aiming aiming for. What he finds strange is why the guy is suggesting hiring more people if he doesn't know any of that. Then he asks, "Are you trying to say I should worry not just about the dungeon, but also the people in the party who might be there just to steal the treasure at the end?" Trias says yes, it's costly, but hiring a few extra hands would be important. Yeah, it'd be important if those hands didn't also want to steal your treasure at the end, right, man? Then you'd have to hire someone to watch those people too, and it'd become an infinite loop. But Calyx responds that he has no intention of doing that. Besides, he didn't have any enemies among the three major powers of this place. Trias is thinking the kid is more naive than he thought. He's being an idiot if he thinks hired mercenaries wouldn't hurt a noble. The problem is that if he insists on this, the contract might end up getting wiped. In the worst case scenario, if things got too dangerous, he'd flee with the Madame and Urina. He says he understands, gives the contract a final check, and with that, it's sealed. Calyx is eager to see how the plan is going to unfold. 3 days later, in a forest near the city, our boy put on his emo clown outfit and Trias says the 260 people he requested are there. The guy, however, is impressed that the kid actually pulled off such an impressive job. Calyx thanks him and says now it's time to begin. He points at a guy and says he's to leave. Everyone's shouting, but Calyx is kicking people out of the army. A while later, Trias says some of the guys he's trying to remove are a bit more resistant than he expected. Our boy tells him to keep an eye on those. Whoever's resisting is probably acting as a spy. Trias asks why, and he says it's obvious, man. A mission this dangerous, anyone would want out. If someone is being given a chance to not die, they should be happy. Now, if they're mercenaries planted by someone, not only would they insist on participating, but even the 50% they received up front wouldn't be enough, since that money would go to whoever hired them. Trias says it makes a lot of sense, and our boy says they should move out already. He knows he hasn't eliminated all the spies, but at least he reduced the chances of this place's info leaking. Then he gets on his course and tells everyone to advance. Along the way, Urina calls for him and asks if he liked her little gift. Looks like she informed Calyx that he's become the target of one of the big powers, and he thanks her, saying that was quite the move. For our boy, all the pieces were now on the board. He knew who was hunting him, and he also had Trias nearby who wanted to protect the Madame, so he served as a double shield. But then Urina asks if he's really that confident about it. She assumes he knows, but the creatures from the Impala Mountains are extremely fierce. Our boy replies that he feels like he's in his own backyard in that place. Confused, she says that makes no sense, since he was raised in Shiken, to which he answers that for some reason he's always dreamed about that place. Suddenly, from behind, Trias asks if he's really not going to say what the final destination is. The area is full of different monsters and territories, and they couldn't just keep marching without knowing where they're headed. At the very least, they should figure it out and send someone ahead to scout the path. Calyx refuses, and the guy tells Krot to say something, but he replies he won't say anything. He trusts his lord 100%. Trias, however, has seen plenty of mercenaries die because of nobles' stupidity. It's a shame, but if things start to get tight, he'll definitely have to pull back. Obviously, some mercs will die, but he can't afford to lose the important ones. Then our boy tells Krot to climb a tree and check the surroundings. Krot obeys and says he sees a goblin camp 500 meters away and asks what they'll do. Our boy replies that it's obvious. They're going to go over there and kill everything, man. Krot comes down and says it's dangerous. Goblin blood can get on your clothes and end up attracting more creatures. Calyx just responds that if someone gets messy killing a goblin, they should give up being a knight. Trias is confused that the guy could see 500 meters away just by climbing a tree. Our boy tells him to check another area and he sees that 400 meters away there are 10 orc houses. Calyx says that's too little and tells him to look somewhere else. While Trias is in disbelief, saying it must be coincidence, like how could anyone have vision like that? Krot then says there's a null settlement 650 meters away.